And here we go, off and away. Beautiful picture here. Our wonderful Ontario. The beautiful beaches here in Ontario. And we're streaming away. We're streaming today. I hope you're doing fine. There's so many streams for us to see, but this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're well. Now come on and join me. Watch the world go to hell. Because we're streaming away. We're streaming today. Let's stream today. Hey Andrew, how you doing today, bud? Good to see you. You changed your name, your icon? Andrew Skipsy? I like it. Lovely night last night, making Galen Weston more money, you bet. Although, good news, Andrew. I don't know if you know this. Galen Weston died fairly recently. So you're still making money for the Weston family, just not Galen Weston. Hey Ruth, how you doing today? Good to see you as always. Good to see you as always, Ruth. And thank you so much for the compliment there, Andrew. I know I've got a nice singing voice. I know it's everybody gets born with a beautiful talent. Everyone has something that comes from inside of them in the existential state of being alive, and my gift is and always has been my singing voice. And I've just never been able to monetize it. You know, that's the true secret of how to make it in this capitalist world. You've got to find a way to make money doing it, and haven't gotten quite there yet. And especially these days, it's very difficult to monetize art and the arts and things like this generally in the society. So it's we'll see. Who knows? Maybe the channel one day will pay my rent. Who knows? Wouldn't that be a gift? That would be a true gift. So let's move right in for the people who are right in the gate. Enough stalling. Let's pick a number between 1 and 10. Let's see if somebody's going to get some divine favor. I'm feeling a 3. I'm feeling a 3. So let's a freelance illustrator, eh? Yeah.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go.
It's September 7, 2021.
Pissed off coming in with a 10. How you doing, bud?
10
Good to see
balls.
you, bud. So we got a 3,
Each
we got a 10.
ball
Anybody else?
has a
Ruth, are you
number.
in? 4 from Ruth. What about you, Andrew?
Numbers 1
you want in
through
on
10.
This? You gambling man?
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. The stakes could not be higher.
Pick a number.
I'm yet to win this. What did I say? 3? 9. We got a late 9 from Andrew.
Today's
the magic
number
is on this channel. 2. So we all whiffed it. But you know what? 4 divided by 2 is 2. Right? So Ruth, I'm going to say that you're the winner today. Why not? Right? You're a double winner. Don't drop that jar, David, while whirling them numbers. Hey DM, how you doing, bud? Good to see you in here today. So not a big news day again. So we're entering a lull, as I would call it. When we get into these kinds of lulls, it turns into a mainly commentary kind of a situation. I, of course, as you know, have plenty to say. So it shouldn't be a trouble for me, but I'm just noting that there's no big kind of story. Everything is just kind of the classic ongoing sort of stuff. And to be fair, the cube root of 8 is 2 as well, but nobody gets that either. Come on, Andrew. You gotta make it so it fits, right? I could say, okay, so 10 plus 4 is 14, right? And then 14 divided by 2 is 7. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's all nonsense. All right, farewell to the beautiful Ontario picture we have here. Clicky clack. Might as well touch base with this. Absolutely, just little wiggling. I think the Liberals they were at 135, now they're at 134, and the Conservatives were at 145, now they're at 146. Same with the NDP, they were at 35, now they're at 34. The Greens from 2 to 1. Complete disaster for the Greens, if you ask me. I think the Greens are in significant trouble. They're going to have, even if they maintain their seats at 2, I think that they're facing a pretty significant internal fight. I've been seeing, when you see someone like Dimitri Lascaris, when you see the challenger inside of the party grumbling away, the way I see Dimitri Lascaris constantly grumbling away, he's preparing. And so there's going to be an opportunity. I also think if these numbers bear out for Mr. Trudeau, he's going to be facing a leadership convention himself. I'm seeing Chrystia Freeland starting to lay the groundwork for all of that. And it does start to kind of get into territory of do we think that perhaps there is a liberal faction inside of the Liberal Party who sort of is intending for this election to maybe not go so well so that they have an excuse to oust Trudeau and seize power for themselves? Do we think they're clever enough for that? When it comes to internal power struggles, it seems like the Liberals are the smartest people ever. When it comes to helping citizens, they're smart, but not in the way we'd like. I hope Paul Manley loses. He's a capitalist apologist through and through. Yeah, I mean, we need a real socialist party in this country. It should be the Greens. It makes sense that it would be the Greens, especially in kind of capitalist Canada and capitalist North America, that we should have a small sort of fringe group of people calling themselves socialists and saying that's what they want to be. That used to be the NDP, but then, of course, as they become a more mainstream party, they abandon the socialism moniker, right? Which, isn't that just the way? It's like whenever you see somebody, when they make a movie out of a book that you really liked, and then they change the story, and you're like, but the book became popular enough for you to justify the making of this movie, why would you change the story now, right? Happens all the time. Oh, you don't think it would make sense that it would be the Greens? I think the Greens are. We'll see when the next fight comes. But Dimitri Lascaris, he is a socialist. He lost the last leadership fight in the Green Party by 3 points or 4 points or something like that. So it was very close. Cons up. This isn't what I was told would happen. Exactly, Drew. Good to see you, bud. Hey, Crouching, how you doing, bud? All right. So, again, this is going to be just kind of a hodgepodgey sort of a day of commentary, and you're seeing things. So, I wanted to bring this to the forefront because it really does show you that the neoliberals aren't really sure what to do, right? That the neoliberals, as their system collapses, as their system runs out of gas, and they don't really have any way to shore it up in any serious way, they just don't know what to do. Bank of Canada in a pickle when it comes to housing. National Bank, right? So National Bank economist Warren Lovely said the Bank of Canada is in a tough spot ahead of its monetary policy decision Wednesday, given housing markets all over the country are battling affordability. They don't actually say it within the article, but really the entire article just sort of says what's the Bank of Canada supposed to do, right? Because their whole system of transferring the economic growth of the nation into the housing market and then having billionaires buy up that market, well, they're running out of road, right? They're running out of road. And if they raise interest rates, right, which is sort of the classic way to deal with this, interest rates right now are super low. So literally anybody can borrow money at almost nothing. And especially if you're one of the hyper wealthy, you can literally borrow money at negative interest. They're literally giving money away to try and keep this economy going. But if they jack up the interest rates, that doesn't matter to the wealthy, right? The wealthy are rich. The wealthy have money. They've got all the money in the world. They're not borrowing this money to do this. And in fact, there are lots of systems in place so that so that the government borrows money from the wealthy at interest, in fact. And it's just like this insane, like anytime you see a public-private partnership or anything like this, you have these odd connections. And so you end up with weird statements, like not an easy place for the Bank of Canada. Given the risk and given the uncertainty, a sort of stand-pat decision perhaps makes the most sense. Suffice it to say, there are some question marks around the ability of the labor market to continue to generate good jobs. Like, this guy's literally just like throwing out, these are the people who are in control of things. These are the people who we've put in charge of kind of knowing what's going on. Yet we see lots of reasons to expect inflation to prove a bit sticky, said Lovely, to remain perhaps in an uncomfortable zone for central bankers, not just for 1 or 2 months, but for an expected period of time. So this is like the calmest, nicest way to say that our economy is going into the shitter. That our economy is totally going into the shitter, that all of our prices are going to go through the roof as the billionaire class buys up all of the commodities, and nobody is even offering solutions because guess what? In a collapsing capitalist system, the only solution is to be rid of the collapsing capitalist system. Exactly, Crouching. It's a snake eating its own tail. And the only thing that you can do is to pry its own tail out of its mouth and then, try to actually build a real economy based on something, right? Based on actually helping people, right? There should be a socialist and communist party. First of all, how you doing, Inquiring Mind? Good to see you. I've always loved, I think I told you this the first time I saw it, but I love your text. I don't know, how did you get that text? It's like, it's just beautiful. There should be a socialist and communist party. They don't have to win. Yet they could just be there to pull the other parties to the left. And I have been trying to contact the Vote Communist people. I even had an interview planned and ready to go, and we actually sat down, we got on the Zoom call, and then suddenly they kind of bounced on me. I don't know why. I don't know why that happened, but I am yet to be convinced that there is actually a functioning communist party of any sort here in Canada. They all seem to follow this trend of being bought by capitalists and then put up a communist front so that people who funnel their way into communism can be funneled into a dead end, right? And that seems to be the nature of the communist parties that exist here in Canada. To me, from what I see, the best strategy for actual socialists that actually exist is to continue funneling their energy into the NDP, because there's a fairly strong socialist faction that exists within the NDP through Socialist Action, which is an organization that I'm a part of. They go into the NDP, and a big reason why the NDP have on their platform a basic income is because of the socialists within the party. And the hope, as socialists begin to funnel their energy into the NDP, is that the socialist wing becomes so large that it overwhelms the NDP, and then the NDP becomes a socialist party. That's the big hope for the NDP, and I think it's completely possible, especially as Jagmeet Singh begins to hit the real hard barriers, right? That he's going to stick around because he's seen growth, right? This growth here, 34 seats, it's almost a doubling of the amount of seats he has now. So that's a pretty major success for any candidate, right? Like, if the Greens were sitting on 4 seats instead of the 1 they are right now, or the 2 that they currently have, and it would be real great news for Annamie Paul. She would be sitting pretty, right? And so Jagmeet Singh finds himself in a very similar position. But I think that Jagmeet Singh has hard lines on him, unlike all of the other candidates. I do think that Jagmeet Singh has significant hard lines, and I've been very upfront about what those hard lines are. And so I don't feel any shame saying that he is a Sikh, a brown man with a big beard and a turban, and I have been told several times by several sources who I respect and admire that Western Canada is not going to vote for a Sikh. Hands down, period, full stop. And so that's a hard line. It's very difficult to also believe that Quebec is going to suddenly swing towards a man who is wearing a turban as they pass legislation specifically to prevent government officials from wearing religious garments, right? It becomes very difficult. And it's sad. It sucks. I'm not a fan of it. But that does mean that the NDP are going to have a very hard uphill battle ahead of them. And it's... Can they win? I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence either. GPC leadership's always been super neolib. Well, for goodness sakes, what's her name? The previous Green Party leader. I cannot believe I'm blanking on her name. Oh, anyway, she Elizabeth May. There we go. I did it. Elizabeth May. She seemed like a good person, but she worked with Brian Mulroney, right? Like she's essentially a conservative, and her perspective of the economic system is like, oh, neoliberal capitalism, we can work with that in order to also be environmentally conscious. And she doesn't recognize or realize that the neoliberal system itself is the thing that's generating the problem, and that you can't get away from that. And I feel the same way about Annamie Paul. I like Annamie Paul. I've talked to Annamie Paul. I think Annamie Paul believes in what she's doing. I think that she does see that something has to be done about the climate. She has sons, and she speaks about how she needs to do this for her sons. I think that she's genuine as a person. I just also think that she's a neoliberal capitalist. And just how there's no such thing as being a good slaveholder, right? There's just no such thing as being a good neoliberal capitalist. It's just not possible to do. The system itself is corrupt. And I have this exact same concern for Jagmeet Singh. I think that Jagmeet Singh is, he's more complex because I think he's more influenced by his faith than the other candidates. Obviously he is. And so he has an interesting kind of mix of ideology going on. But in the end, like the economic system he purports to support is neoliberal capitalism, right? He's just like more liberal. Do liberalism, but more. Let's see what you guys are saying. I love it when you guys all come in and you're all talking and you got ideas and thoughts. It's so brilliant. It makes my job so much easier, guys. You have no idea. It does seem like the UBI has gone on the back burner. I'm with you on that, DM. I'm with you on crouching. Like, we need a basic income. Like, we need it. Like, if they removed the CERB, right? If the CRB and all these support systems were just suddenly extracted from the society and lifted out, it would be a complete disaster. Like, we would look like the United States, right? There's 600,000 homeless people in the United States right now. Like, it's a disaster. Like, period. It's a social disaster. It's a major social crisis. And if we were to remove the support systems we have in place now, we would do the same thing. It would look exactly the same. So what we need to be doing is accepting that neoliberal capitalism is not a good system. It's not a good system of support. That rather than dealing with this instability that is generated by neoliberal capitalism, we need stable support systems that guarantee that citizens have access to food and shelter at all times. And then we can move from there. But it really does look like, and considering that, like, should the election go through as it stands, like, you're looking at a conservative minority, which will likely be propped up by a liberal government. And both of them agree. Like, both of them think that we should be removing these support systems and selling out back to the capitalist death cult, right? Both of them agree that that should be the case. And so, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Like, I feel like there's a lot of... this election is really indicative of the idea that, like, political gamesmanship it seems to be mattering more in the House than actual concerns about the populace, right? That one hopes that all of these protests, like Trudeau had gravel thrown at him recently, right? Like, Trudeau had people are throwing stones at him, right? And all the leaders decry it, right? Everybody say, even fucking Maxime Bernier is like, whoa, about it, right? And I hope that's a bit of a wake-up call for the Liberals and Justin Trudeau, right? That, like, oh, we actually do have to consider that there are, human beings in this conversation, right? We can't just, like, willy-nilly call an election, and expect people to kind of go along with it. Yeah, true, and both should be running a full slate of candidates. Problem is how much it costs. UBI was at the fore of the NDP convention. I hope, this is my statement on the UBI and the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, which is, if Jagmeet Singh doesn't mention it at the debates, at the leadership debate, then I think he's been bought. That will essentially formulate my opinion about Jagmeet Singh. And make no mistake, Jagmeet Singh can completely be bought. He can absolutely be bought by neoliberal capital, right? And if he doesn't mention the basic income in the debates, or if he does mention it, but it's kind of like off on the side after someone else mentions it, someone like Anime Paul, I think we can pretty safely say that he's been bought by neoliberal capital. He has to at least bring it up. And I'm hoping at this point his strategy is to kind of hold back that right hook, right? Hold back the big punch and then come out with it right when it matters, which would be the leadership debate. And the leadership debate is going to be a big deal. Show up on the 9th here. It is the 9th that I'm talking about. Yeah, if you come in here on Thursday at 9 p.m., I'm going to do an extra long stream, and I'm going to stream the debate. We're all going to watch the debate together if you're here. So come on in. Bumble Guppy. I feel like I always say Bubble Guppy. Bumble Guppy. Do you think that the housing issue is a symptom of wealth inequality? Like they are so rich they've run out of investment schemes that are realistic? Yeah. I mean, you answer your own question. That's exactly what it is. They don't have anything else to buy. They don't have anywhere else to put their money. And they don't care if you have a house, right? They don't give a shit about that at all. So they're literally just like buying up anything they can in order to have stable places to keep their money while simultaneously collapsing the economy that we all require, right? Like, and wealth inequality itself is a symptom of neoliberal capital, right? Like it's just natural that this occurs given the structure of neoliberal capital. And then wealth inequality spurs stupid nonsense like Jeff Bezos shooting a rocket into space and shit like that, right? Like, so, and things are going to get really dumb. Like we're going to see some really dumb shit, I fear. Like they're talking about putting like billboards in space where you'll look up at space and there'll be like literally a billboard floating by. Like that kind of, like, and that's dumb. Like that's just really, really dumb fuck shit. And we're going to see that kind of shit before this ends. Like we're going to see all this because before it ends. They really need to clean house of the liberals in the party itself. I mean, we'll see what happens. I have mixed feelings about Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland is the next leader of the Liberal Party. Like, I think that we can... Like, I'd be very surprised to see anybody but Chrystia Freeland become the leader of the Liberal Party after Justin Trudeau. And she seems to be the one that actually has the ideas. Like, when she talks, she actually... Like, she does know what she's talking about. She's not like Trudeau, who's just, like, reading a cue card. But... At the same time, it's like, okay, there's a difference between knowing what's going on, which she does, like she's written books on the subject of wealth inequality and all of that, and actually doing something to address it, right? So I have a kind of mixed, I don't know where Chrystia Freeland actually stands, right? Because maybe she's just doing that liberal thing that liberals do, which is like, of course I know all the issues, of course, here it is, all this kind of stuff. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm going to completely sell you out to neoliberal capital like I always do. But I know everything about the subject. Courage Coalition, also a good group for that. I'm not familiar with Courage Coalition. Basic Income March at Nathan Phillips Square on the 18th, 1 p.m. Yeah, and I've reached out to the basic income people who are running. Is it at Nathan? Yes, it is at Nathan Phillips Square. You're right. And they're going to do a march, and I asked them if I'm holding a protest with Poof. I shouldn't say I'm holding a protest. I'm part of a protest with Poof that they are closing down the street at Yonge and Dundas Square. And I reached out to the basic income people who are marching, and I said to them, like, hey, this is perfect. Like, why don't you show up at your thing at 1 p.m., have a rally, march to our thing, and stop and join this anti-poverty rally and close down the street. But they don't want to close the street down, right? They don't want to be part of closing streets down. To which my response is, so you want to be as ineffective as possible, right? That like when you have rallies that are just sort of like on the side or whatever, those essentially function to just get support for your own group, right? It's just getting your own group together to be a group. And that builds power within your own group and builds confidence within your own group. But if you actually want to get stuff done, if you want to draw attention to yourself, you got to take over infrastructure. You have to. You have to. Man, you guys are chatting away. I love it. Even the NDP. Hey Vince, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. I like Yanis Varoufakis. He's very, very prescient. He's very, very prescient. Very, very prescient. We should also start talking about the universal basic dividend as opposed to the UBI. The UBI is based on taxes, while the UBD is the collective ownership of capital and national resources. Yeah, and in many cases, I find that a lot of those conversations can get really bogged down because they're just different ways to achieve similar goals. Like, a big conversation that happened in the early days of the basic income movement as it resurged back in Canada was the difference between a basic income and then a negative income tax. And finally, when they all got broken down and everything, they literally were the same thing, just kind of from a different, like, one was coming from this direction, the other was coming from this direction. And functionally, they ended up kind of working the same anyway. And so once everybody kind of realized that, the conversation sort of dissipated. And I wonder, I don't know much about the universal basic dividend, but I wonder if it's going to follow that same kind of trajectory where everyone is going to finally go like, well, but isn't that kind of just the same thing in the end? I mean, I do think that, like, our housing market should be nationalized. Like, these skyscrapers that are full of condos and this kind of shit should be nationalized. I've seen enough, right? I've seen enough. Similar to how most people in XR see the whole environmental movement. Yeah, Yanis Varoufakis, very, very prescient. He was the president of Greece for a moment, and then he resigns because he realizes that the external forces that are inflicting themselves on the Grecian economy are non-rational, that they're not interested in resolving the problem, they're interested in power for themselves. Even if the NDP gains seats, it's time for Jagmeet to resign and get a Matthew Green as leader. Electing a black man would be more possible than a Sikh in Canada. At least I'd think so. I want the NDP to win a majority. It's time for change. Yeah. I mean, I am still willing to give Jagmeet Singh a shot, but I do think that he needs to be more direct. I think that he's being a bit serendipitous and a bit, not serendipitous, but a bit circuitous, like a bit cutesy. A bit sort of like crossing his fingers and hoping it isn't the case that Canadians are not voting for him because he's wearing a turban. I think he needs to take the question straight on. Like, really. And I think that, not this election, obviously, but the next one, he absolutely needs to make it a bigger talking point. And he needs to face it. He needs to face it. Because he has to challenge Canadians. He has to challenge them. Because Canadians are willing to be challenged in this way, I think. And sure, it's going to bring up the white supremacists, and sure, he's inviting that kind of shit, right? Absolutely. Let's not fool ourselves. But if he... stupid, I have a light here, and it's being very finicky. Stop being finicky. But he needs to do it. He has to do it. He has to challenge Canadians, and he has to say to them, like, seriously, like, the only reason you're not voting for me is because I wear a turban, and I've got a big beard, and I'm a brown dude. Like, and I would like to see him say it like that. Like, for real. Like, stop putting on the fluffy piano music. Stop talking to Canadians like, we are going to move forward into the progressive future of the light of the sunshine rainbows, right? Like, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The beer drinkers at the pub are not going to vote for this guy unless he genuinely looks at them like the fucking bears that they are and says, for real, I can't get your support because I wear a turban, I've got a big beard, and I'm brown, and I'm Sikh. That's it? Like, that's it. You don't care about anything else except that? Wow. Like, he needs to confront it. It must be confronted. And if he's not willing to confront it, he should resign. And if he does confront it, and then his party stagnates, he needs to resign. But I think I'm willing to give him the shot. But at this stage in the game, I think he does need to just, like, hope and wishes aren't going to get it done. He needs to fight for it. And that's just kind of the sad truth. I wish it wasn't the case. I genuinely wish it wasn't the case for him. Because I like Jagmeet Singh. I like him. Like, if he, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If he was a white dude named Jason Singer, I think people would be, I don't think he'd be sitting at 34 seats. I think he'd be much higher than that. Oh yeah, I wish Leighton was alive for 2015. I also wish Tom Mulcair hadn't to run the disaster campaign he ran, right? Like, if Mulcair had to come out swinging, I think he would have won. Yeah, I'm with you, Vince. I wanna give him the chance. I want to give him the opportunity to actually say it out loud. One has to have a job in order to get paid sick leave. Yeah, paid sick leave from... And there's a reason he's saying that paid sick leave line, though, because that ties in with what Ontarians have been hearing from Andrea Horvath. And so that gives kind of a consistency of thought, right? I will post your criticism of the CPC. Hey, Dan Boxes, how you doing, bud? I will post your criticism of the CPC to my friend who's the official candidate in Saskatoon, hopefully as a response. I find your skepticism of the Communist Party here very strange. I just can't get a hold of these guys, dude. Like, that's what it really comes down to. I can't get a hold of these guys. They don't talk to me. When they do talk to me, they bail on the interviews. I send emails. I try to get a hold. I try to do all this kind of stuff. Near as I can say. And no, I don't take it as disrespect at all, Dan Boxes. And I hope that I'm wrong. I sincerely do. I sincerely hope that I am wrong. But everything that I have seen tells me that these guys are just there to deflect energy. And I mean, that's great that they recognize housing as a right and all that kind of stuff. But, like, come talk to me. Like, come talk to me. And I don't, like, I don't understand why these guys aren't talking. Like, I don't see them anywhere. Who's actually reaching out to these guys? Leighton only would have won because he was very good at reading political currents. I mean, like, yeah, that's how you win. Also forgot to tell you. So apparently Jugmeat is part of the Davos World Bank Youth Leadership. Yeah, of course. But you're never going to become the leader of a country unless there's like a significant upswell of public support without being aligned with some of these organizations, right? Aligned with the World Economic Forum's mission, we seek to drive public-private cooperation in the global public governance. Yeah, I mean, we've known this about Jugmeat. We've known this about the NDP generally, right? Like that it is going to take massive populist movements. The Com Party Canada platform calls for 1 million units quantity housing at no more than 20% of income. We are in crisis. Housing is a human right. Anything less is profoundly unserious. Yeah. I think Nikki is too progressive for the party. Could make a great House leader, but as leader, I think Matthew or Alexandria in Quebec should lead the party next. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I like Nikki Ashton. I do. But I think that she... I just don't think that she could actually get elected as the leader of Canada, right? For similar reasons, right? Because Canada is not as progressive as we like to pretend it is. Too many liberals writing policy for the NDP. I am blocked on Twitter by so many liberals. Yeah, they're so sensitive when you call it their BS. Yeah. No, they don't. Well, because they, like, liberalism requires... it requires a kind of assumption that they're being genuine, right? And they're not. Like, they're not being genuine. And it's starting to get to the point now where it's becoming pretty plain that they're not being genuine. That if they just don't want to confront capital. They know who's paying the bills. They know where the money is coming from. Yeah, the swamp is too deep with the Fibberals, yeah. If you're taking over infrastructure, you run the risk of making yourself antagonistic to working people, like the XR tube station debacle. Yeah, you got to run that risk. Very simple. Like, very simple. It's, you don't have, when you don't have a choice, right? It's about visibility, right? Like, because what people want is they want the poor and the homeless and the disabled and the elderly to just die silently. That's what they want, right? And they get mad when they refuse to die silently. So, and I don't really get into this run the risk of making people antagonistic, like they were supporting us in the first place. Like they were good buddies. Like they were coming out and really thinking about us and voting for us in the first place. So I don't mind that. Like, oh no, people who weren't supporting us in the first place are antagonistic to us. So? My feeling is very straightforward. If you're not making enemies, you're probably not doing much of anything that matters. I know hardcore boomers that didn't vote NDP in 2019 just because Jagmeet is not a white French male. Yeah, literally that's why. They agree with his policies but still didn't vote for him. Yeah, isn't that it's just a sad truth. I know the type, but I also know some really pleasant older ladies who are really hopeful the prevalence of chase shirts and cultural spaces indicated a leftward movement. Well, and like, it's just very... It's a very awkward conversation to have. Like, I feel really bad for people who are going to be at these NDP conventions who have to bring up and start stating what is obviously true about Jagmeet Singh, right? It's just an unfortunate truth that has to be confronted. And if the NDP never confront it, well, then Jagmeet's A, not going to win. But then B, the NDP is never going to win, right? Like, so... It's just an unfortunate truth. Like, Canadians aren't ready for it. We don't live in the Star Trek future, right? We don't live in this position where people are saying, well, let's listen to what he has to say, and, oh, I quite agree with that. Very well, checkbox, right? People are very much like, well, let's listen to what he has to say, and, ooh, I don't think I'll be voting for him. No. That's the conversation, right? So, Nikki is not progressive enough. If we're going to take over the NDP, we need many more people like Nikki and many more people in the NDP to the left of her. I say that as someone who likes Nikki a lot. She had a great conversation with Corbyn last year that she got in trouble for. The NDP is already in power in BC, currently overseeing one of the biggest mass arrests for civil disobedience in Canada's history at Fairy Creek. Yeah. Tough times, right? That the NDP is sort of... At this stage, it's revealing its true colors, right? It's revealing its true colors. And that said, right, the NDP is not exactly a powerhouse party in regards to the amount of support that it has in the party. Like, you think about Jagmeet Singh's takeover of... How did he do that? How did he take over the NDP? Well, he did that because he has a small niche group of people who are willing to come out and support him. And the reality about politics is that it is... in the end, fundamentally a numbers game. That if you bring 1,000 people and I bring 10,000 people, I win, right? And like, if the numbers are close, like if you bring, 1,200 and I bring 1,100 or 1,300 even, let's say I do bring more people, then you can sort of fuss with things and sort of do things on all that kind of stuff if it's close. But if I bring 10 times the numbers and I win, right? Like, it is that simple. That's why I think taking to the streets is the answer, because people right now are able to have their opinion manipulated very easily because they don't understand that their opinion is the popular opinion. And once you get people into the streets and they can actually see one another, right, then it makes that a concrete reality. Like, that's what happened with the climate change conversation here in Canada. That we were being dicked around, and then suddenly there were big protests with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. And then we still got dicked around, but at least it was like some kind of motion in the correct direction. We truly, when we did those gigantic protests, we should have stayed in the streets. And I say that all the time. When 100,000 people showed up in the streets, we should have just stayed. And like been like, nope, pass the policy, shut down the fossil fuel industry. We're not going to leave until you do. Yeah, Horgan has really sort of he's revealed himself to be a corporate guy, right? That's what it comes down to. I've actually been thinking about I want to watch The Lord of the Rings again. And The Lord of the Rings, I actually think is anti-capitalist propaganda, right? That the Ring of Power is capitalist, like industrial capitalism, right? And that the way Tolkien sees the destruction of capitalism is that you have to take the power of capitalism and return it back from when it came and throw it back. You have to reject it, right? And even within the confines of that story, there's quite a lot of nuance because... the bearer of the ring, i.e. Frodo, i.e. likely the person we're all electing, ultimately won't do it. That it is the capitalist system itself, through the figure of Gollum, who will destroy capitalism ultimately. Because in the end, capitalism reveals itself to be monstrous, right? That eventually it will be so despicable and so disgraceful that you can't help but reject it. Heard of Chris Sky? He was in Nova Scotia, had 100 people show up his rally. He's getting more and more popular the longer the passport discussion continues. Same with Bernier. Yep. And I've got some stuff down here about Bernier as well. So I'm very concerned about the rise. And the thing that concerns me the most about the rise of the PPC is not the rise of the PPC. It is that it's pretty obvious our media is covering for them. I've got an article right here that really, is it one of these? Come on. First of all, People's Party, Maxime Bernier egged at campaign event. There's a First Nations gentleman that came in, pretended to want a photo with Maxime and then hit him with an egg. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So, like, you know, eat it. Eat it. We have, do I have it ready here? There's there is somebody caught the CBC. Here we go. Maxime Bernier Wikipedia article edited anonymously from Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They took out language indicating that Maxime Bernier is a far-right leader, and he obviously is, right? That's blatant. And they edited all of that out. And that's the CBC doing it to Wikipedia. So what is the story there? Why is the CBC editing articles about Maxime Bernier and likely about the People's Party, right, to cover for the fact that they are a far-right white supremacist movement, right? Like, why is the media not reporting on it? Like, Aaron O'Toole has fairly strong ties to Rebel Media, which itself has very strong ties to the Proud Boys, right? Why has this been silenced in our media? Why are we not talking about it? Why is it that the CBC is literally covering for these guys? That's where my concern is coming, right? My concern is less that the PPC exists. I sort of expect them to exist. It's that our media is actively covering for them. That's extremely concerning to me, that we would have a neo-fascist white supremacist movement being covered by our state-funded apparatus. That's extremely concerning. And in the meantime, like, it would be one thing if we saw this kind of article, if we saw the CBC doing that kind of thing, and then, you know, having an opinion piece, at least an opinion piece, saying like, hey, let's talk about the white supremacy that exists here in Canada, and let's talk about its connections to the People's Party and the Conservative Party, right? Let's talk about it. But there isn't even a single opinion piece about it. So, like, our media is 100% covering for the white supremacists in our society. They're not allowing anyone to talk about it, even in an opinion piece. They're not doing investigative journalism about it. They're not actually focusing on it. They're leaving it to groups like antihate.ca and Press Progress to actually do it. And my question is why? Why is that the case? Why is it the case that our media apparatus is covering for overt, obvious, explicitly stated white supremacists? We should be deeply concerned about this. We should be deeply concerned about this. Yeah, Horgan's entire response basically trying to sweep the whole thing under the rug. Yeah. Ford botched this pandemic. Of course he did. Because Ford doesn't give a shit about people. Like, he doesn't give a fuck about the poor or anything like that. Exactly. You can't fight propaganda with propaganda. You have to meet people in real life and break through. I'm a bit more forgiving than you guys are being about almost all the premiers except Ford. Although, fuck them. Pallister and Kenny, all these idiots. But it'd be done now, and he could point to it as a promise kept to uphold UNDRIP. Lord of the Rings tells the story from an alternative lifestyle to capital, and the critique of capital is assumed. That's pretty bold. I mean, capitalism is ultimately self-defeating, yeah. And the story of Lord of the Rings shows that, right? That it isn't Frodo who throws the ring into the fire. It isn't Frodo that throws the ring into the fire, right? In fact, Frodo ultimately is corrupted by the ring. It's one of the twisted distortions created by the system of capital, who in its manic desire to seize control of the One Ring flings himself into the fire to the full destruction of the capitalist system, right? This is somebody like an Adolf Hitler, right? Somebody who seizes the means of production, the productive capacity of capital, and destroys himself with it, right? Which is an inevitability. That's how the capitalist system is structured. It's structured to inevitably destroy itself. The question that we are facing is whether or not we, as a people, want to be destroyed with it, right? Can we destroy the ring of capitalism while protecting the Shire? Or are we going to have to see the Shire burn down first? So we'll have to pick. You know what's a classic anti-capitalist movie? Trading Places. Trading Places. That sounds so familiar. Trading Places. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is a classic 80s. There's a lot of really great classic 80s films. Booster's Millions is another really good one. That is a Richard Pryor movie that tells the story of a man who is given a challenge from a long-lost relative that says, you have to spend, I think it's $30 million. Like, you've got to spend $30 million in an allotted space of time. And if you can manage to spend the $30 million, then you will receive $300 million. And in his quest to spend all the money, he realizes that you can't actually spend that kind of money. That once you attain a certain level of wealth in the American economic system, your spending of money actually returns itself, right? That it isn't spending in terms of the way that we think about it, where we get rid of the money and then we receive some item that we then consume. When you have that amount of money, you are actually spending money, and then that money turns around and generates extra money for yourself. And in the end, his solution, his very elegant solution, is that he decides to run a political campaign, and he says his entire platform is that he's going to run what did he call it? An alternative option or none of the above. That's what it is. He's going to run none of the above, and if you vote for him, his only campaign promise was that he was going to instantly resign, so that the people who are running wouldn't get power, right? And he said, like, the system should have a none of the above option. We should be able to choose none of the above, and straight up just say, look, if we don't think any of you are competent to do the job, then we're not going to take any of you. And so it was a wonderful critique of not only the capitalist economic system, which is to say that the rich cannot become poor. It's just not possible. The economic system is designed so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But also a great statement, a great critique of the political structure, which is, why are we constantly forced into this choice between these shitty options, right? We should be able to reject all of them, right? That any system that had credibility should be allowed to say no. But you can't. Booster's Millions. Here, Booster's Millions. Really great film. I mean, it's Brewster's Millions. There it is right there. John Candy, Richard Pryor. Right? It's mainly a vehicle for Richard Pryor. One of the great comedians. One of the great comedians throughout the 70s and 80s. Absolutely. But Trading Places, also a really, really great film. Really, that takes the classic sort of Mark Twain, The Prince and the Pauper story, and puts it into the modern era, where there's another really great one that follows this line is Life Stinks. You want to see a really great film that is in my view, is actually Mel Brooks' masterpiece. This film, Life Stinks, is one of the boldest, most powerful stories that Mel Brooks tells. That when people think about Mel Brooks, they think about Blazing Saddles is typically the one. But this is a film about like a wealthy capitalist billionaire who wants to get control over a section of the city. And so he takes a bet with other capitalists that he can go live as a homeless person on the streets for a period, I think, of 30 days or something like this. And through that process, right, rich man becomes poor, all of this, he gains empathy for the people on the streets. And it's a film that reveals homelessness. It's a film that reveals homelessness in a way that you don't see in film. That in this modern era, in the post like 9/11 world that we live in, homelessness is invisible. It's not part of our movies. They'll literally clear a homeless encampment so there doesn't need to be homeless people in the shot when they have a park or anything like this. So homelessness has been invisibilized in our society. And a film like Life Stinks essentially takes the subject of homelessness and makes it the thesis and the theory of the film itself, which is incredibly powerful. And it's very telling that it takes someone like Mel Brooks, who somebody's mentioning Spaceballs. Yeah, of course, Spaceballs. Spaceballs is great, eh? I hope that they do a sequel, dude. I hope we get Spaceballs: The Quest for More Money. Well, come on, guys. Let's do it. Let's do it. I hope Mel Brooks is somehow involved in the project, and this is his very last film is Spaceballs 2, The Quest for More Money. Like, come on. I would absolutely love to watch that film. But it's extremely telling of the filmmaking system that it takes a figure like Mel Brooks, who has major blockbuster successes like Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs is a great example, and it takes him to say, okay, now I want to tell a story about homelessness. And I bet you any amount of money that people were like, really, Mel? Like, why do you want to tell this? Like, it's not going to be popular. No one's going to know about it. And of course, the capitalist class has done everything it can to sort of forget that this film exists. And in my view, it's his masterpiece. It's literally the apex of his entire career because of how strikingly honest the film is about issues like homelessness, issues like wealth, issues like the corruption of wealth. So very, very important film, comes out of Mel Brooks, so I like to spread it around. 91, right? 91. And nobody knows about it. Nobody knows it exists. Greed is a good 80s movie about a rich old man who tests his family to see if they're worthy of being his heirs. That sounds exactly like an 80s movie plot. Greed, 80s movie. Let's take a look at the poster. I feel like, of course, it's getting, that sounds like is it maybe Greedy? Oh, I think I know this one. Yeah, this is a Kirk Douglas. Michael J. Fox. Yeah, I know this one, where it's like a classic 80s, like kind of, not a race movie, but like a you know, it's a farce comedy predicament film. Yeah, exactly. Knives Out has similar themes too, and I think you could tie Knives Out very specifically to this film, Greedy. What was really great about 80s films, right, is that they were explicit in their themes. That today's movies, something like Knives Out, it has to be a bit more like on the DL about the themes of greed and capitalism and all this kind of stuff. In the 80s, they were literally just like, he's a rich, greedy businessman, right? Like, it was explicit. The critique of wealth was explicit. Even in films like Scrooged, right? Scrooged, right? The sort of manic insanity of overwhelming wealth or ambition, right? Even a film like Groundhog's Day, right? Groundhog's Day has a similar thing going on with it, where it's explicit in its sort of like, yeah, people who are on this sort of hamster wheel of ambition are miserable, right? Well, happy birthday to your father. Good to see you, Andrew. Good to see you. Enjoy your cake. Enjoy your cake. Oh, good to see you, Duke. I didn't see you come into the room. I love all this other stuff. I have to check it out, too. Yeah, Life Stinks is great. It's a great film, man. I mean, of course it is. It's Mel Brooks, right? Like, it's gonna absolutely... But, like, think about this, man. Like, you'll never see films like Scrooged. Have we seen films like... here we are talking about this, right? That getting, like, Life Stinks and like, Brewster's Millions and all this kind of stuff. And so we have a very distinct period of time throughout the late 70s and 80s where major headlining comedians, Bill Murray, right? That's a major headlining comedian, can tell stories about the fallacies and the flaws that wealth bring. That these are cautionary tales against having ambition, placing your career ambition or your ambition for wealth or your desire for wealth above your friends and your family and your community, right? Like a story like Groundhog's Day is almost explicitly about that. And like you have major actors getting involved in those sorts of projects that are coming out right at the beginning of the neoliberal capitalist era. Where are those movies today? Where are the movies that are coming out of America that are a critique of capital? Where are they? Can anyone even say one film that has as your protagonist a person who is on this ambition path to the rejection and detriment of everyone around them, who comes to realize that his path for towards greed is actually a path laid with folly, and comes to the realization that he needs to change his ways, right? Like Scrooged, the Brewster's Millions, Life Stinks, and a plethora of others. Even a film like Coming to America tackles this issue, and Trading Places, as was suggested, right? 50 Shades of Grey. You know what? You're right, dude. You did it. Nailed it, man. Nailed it. You're right about that inquiring mind. That's absolutely correct. There used to be more movie studios that were willing to take chances. Yet now Disney owns everything, and everything is bland. And because it's one big studio, right? It's one big studio. Of course they're not going to release a film that's about the folly of greed and wealth accumulation, right? That's literally what Disney is doing, right? That if they were to make a film that was about the folly of greed and wealth accumulation, and it was successful, it would be a scathing indictment of themselves. That I would actually have mad respect for it. Like if Disney came out with a film like that, I would be like, holy shit, Disney is like getting like self-analytical. They're literally looking at themselves and being like, okay, and where are the pitfalls and how could we, and they like make a movie that's literally about how doing exactly what they're doing is folly. And it just doesn't exist anymore. Right? Exactly. Like Bumbleguppy is saying, I'm drawing a blank on newer films like that, man. Yeah, because they don't exist. And shows that actually start to go down that path of taking a more critical analysis of the capitalist system and the capitalist model get shelved. The one that I saw that absolutely hit that trajectory was, the horse one, BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman was an absolutely brilliant series. If you don't know about BoJack Horseman, it's on Netflix, and oh yeah, There Will Be Blood. That one is a little bit different because he doesn't actually come to realize that what he's done is folly, right? That's a truly tragic tale. Here, one second, guys. I gotta close the window. It's starting to rain out here. Oh yeah, you see the trees starting to move around. Absolutely great. It's a shame I gotta close the window. I do like a good rain. I do like a good rain. Yeah, There Will Be Blood is a good one, actually. That does deal with this idea that like wealth accumulation ultimately leads to folly. Like the lead character in There Will Be Blood ends up alone, isolated in his palace. Ends up and then ends. I don't want to spoil anything. Blood. There Will Be Blood is actually a great film to bring up because it is like, and Daniel Day-Lewis is absolutely brilliant in it. And it is exactly the story that we're talking about, right? It's about like power and wealth accumulation above all else, and just like the gobbling up of resources and the growing and all of this. And ultimately all of that, his sort of manic journey for power, the kind of antagonist of the film, the true antagonist of the film is himself, but the antagonist of the film is this religious fellow who's essentially doing exactly what he's doing, but with a religious congregation, with a church congregation, and the confrontation that they have with one another that ultimately he sacrifices everything in order to defeat. What about Citizen Kane? I mean, that's way back, right? Like Citizen Kane. I haven't seen Citizen Kane in forever, dude. Citizen Kane is one of those movies that everybody is like, it's the greatest movie ever filmed, and then you sit down and you actually watch it, and you're like, oh yeah, like today this would have been like a 20-minute episode, in a show of like some. I feel that way about Casablanca. Casablanca is like, everyone's like, it's one of the greatest films ever made, and I'm literally like, Casablanca, if it was filmed today, would be like a half-hour show on like one of those like Tales from the Crypt Keeper style shows where it's like a short story, right? That so much of both Citizen Kane as well as Casablanca are still in that era of like big, long shots where it's completely acceptable to just like watch, to have like just a straight shot like this and literally watch a guy come in a door, walk across the room, put down a bag, take off his jacket, someone else comes from like upstage, says like, oh, I didn't hear you come in, and he says, oh, it's a tough day, anything interesting happen, and then they both go sit on the couch, and that's acceptable film. You're just like, that's not flying these days, dude. If you showed anybody a shot like that, they'd be like, "Mwah." Yeah, exactly. They did an episode of DS9 that was Casablanca even. Yeah, because so much of like older film, the pacing was a lot slower. People were way more willing to accept much slower. And I think that comes down to the fact that like there weren't that many films coming out, and film during that period of time was still competing with the stage. That theater was still a legitimate force in terms of financial competition. And so lots of things that you see in 40s and 50s film are just stage presentations. They're just theatrical stage presentations. And if you're watching a theater play, you do accept that someone walks in, walks over, does a kind of thing, all that. It's different. There's just a difference to it. Oh yeah, Twilight Zone's great shit. Hurrying is a symptom of late-stage neoliberal capitalism. I think that's true too, Bumbleguppy. I think that we have a real get-to-the-point attitude about it because we, as people, can't ever settle down. Oh yeah, Fight Club. Fight Club for sure has, well, it's certainly anti-consumerism. It's certainly anti-consumerism, which, I mean, Fight Club is just like, yeah, so they sneak through, but it's, again, like, it doesn't necessarily follow this trajectory of a capital, like, it's very explicitly the trajectory of Scrooge, right? It's that Scrooge trajectory that Charles Dickens' masterful story, A Christmas Carol, one of the greatest stories ever written in my view, is a tale of a hard-nosed capitalist who comes to see the error of his ways and changes his perspective, right? And that story doesn't really get manifest that often anymore. Yeah, there's no more time to just relax and watch a movie. Got to work, cook, clean, get to the mall on the Facebook, etc., etc. And so much of film and television these days is less about sitting down, being regaled with a story that might alter your perspective of the world around you, right? The way that good art does, and is more about just distracting you from the mania that is your life, right? Which is why I think, like, there was a big uptick throughout the 2000s in what I call torture porn, right? The torture porn became a big deal because people needed to express this kind of hateful internal anxiety they have towards their own society. And something like, literally films that are just about a dude taking someone and torturing them, and that's the whole film. There's no plot. Like Saw. Do we all remember Saw? Like, Saw was exactly like that. I loved the Born Free saga. I have no idea what you're talking about, Ruth. Let's go. Born Free saga. Here we go. Born Free, a new adventure. Is this what we're looking at? Is this something that came out like way back in the day, Ruth? And now I'm To Walk with Lions. Hold on, when is this guy? This is 1999. It was filmed in a Taco Bell washroom, legend has it. I don't know anything about this. That's hilarious. It looks great, though. You know who has, like, a brilliant life story? Is Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall's story, man. Like, going and hanging out with apes and stuff. Like, what an absolute baller. Just the other day, They Live is absolutely, you're right on the money, with the sunglasses, right? Where he's, like, putting on the sunglasses and then he can see the signs and stuff. Think about how baller this is. That here's just, like, a woman who decides, I'm just going to go hang out with monkeys and apes and shit. And she does. And then she just becomes, like, the queen of the apes. And, like, everybody now is, like, on the subject of these apes. You're like, yeah, Jane Goodall. You should go find out something about Jane Goodall. And didn't Susan Sarandon play her in, like, a film adaptation? Didn't that happen? Am I crazy? Anyway. Oh yeah, Roddy Piper, man. One of the greatest castings of all time in They Live, man. I think that's hilarious. And Sigourney Weaver, you're correct. I always confuse those two. Isn't that funny? Weaver, Jane Goodall. Yes. Sigourney Weaver, Jane Goodall. What was the name of that movie? She was in a movie, right? Like, that's... Oh, Gorillas in the Mist. Of course, Gorillas in the Mist. Absolutely brilliant film, if you ask me. And, like, really capturing the life. Anyway. We're like, well off the rails, eh? We got talking about film and television and movies and shit. Office Space, yeah, God bless. Office Space, actually, you're right. Office Space is straight up an anti-capitalist treaty, which I think is why it became so popular. You know what film nobody really knows about, but I love? The Gods Must Be Crazy. It's another one of these 80s films that is about... I haven't seen this film in a long time, so I worry that it is one of these films that's not going to age well, and that you're going to watch and just be like, yikes, right? So I don't want to recommend it straight up. But it is about an African tribesman who someone throws a bottle out of a plane, and then he gets this bottle, and the bottle somehow causes problems in the tribe. And so the tribesmen say that this man needs to go and return the bottle. And it's about, like, an African tribesman discovering Western civilization and seeing how insane it is, right? Been a long time since I've watched it, but I seem to remember that it really captured the insanity of Western culture from the perspective of, a very simple life, which I think that's Way Downtown, which is also set in Calgary. Way Downtown? I don't think I know that one. Way Downtown. I don't know what this one is at all. Look at that. Look at that. Always learning, always figuring something out. Always figuring something out. Oh, man. Because, like, there's, like, a little part of me right now that's kind of like, okay, this is just kind of, we're just faffing, right? Like, oh, we're well off the rails and all this kind of stuff. But I got to remind myself, like, no, like, film and television and culture and all that kind of, like, this is our culture and this is what we're doing. And if no one is making films that are genuinely critiquing capitalism, like Parasite was a good one that came out. Joker, I think, is probably the most scathing capitalist treatise that's come out in the last 10 years, certainly. But, like, it seems like they're few and far between these days, right? It seems as though you can't really get a good critical, like, sort of a film that's about critiquing the culture, right? Whereas back in the 80s, it seems like that those sorts of films were coming out with a good amount of regularity, right? That you could almost expect every year there would be one film that was explicitly about analyzing the culture, analyzing the society from a unique and interesting perspective, right? That was about homelessness, poverty, right? That had that kind of analytical structure, and then, you know, told an interesting story within that dynamic. It just doesn't seem to happen anymore. If you can connect anti-capitalism and socialism to things we already know, people need to realize socialism is truly familiar and not alien. Yeah. Well, and also I think people don't really have a concrete idea, and for good reason, right? But people don't really have a good concrete idea as to what capitalism actually is. And you see that manifest in the way people talk about markets, right? People are like, oh, well, the market and all this. And you're like, okay, but like literally tribal societies had markets, right? Like a market is just a good idea in and of itself, right? It just makes sense to have a market, right? That, oh, there's a place where all the goods are that we can go and we can exchange a common currency in order to get the kind of stuff we want, right? Like, oh, okay. Like literal tribe societies figured this out. Like that's not a feature of capital, right? That people don't really understand that what makes capitalism and is who owns the means of production, right? Who gets paid at the end of the day? Because people, they'll say all the time, like, oh, capitalism made iPhones, right? How could you be against capitalism? It made all these technologies. And you got to be like, no, labor made an iPhone, right? It was labor that made the iPhone. The capitalist is the person who gets all the benefits from the sale of that iPhone, right? That it's not the worker that got the benefits. The worker gets paid like a small survival stipend. The capitalist is the one that gets to walk away with the iPhone and then also walk away with the technology and walk away with the bulk of the means of production and the collected productive capacity that gets created by labor through time, right? That's how you end up with this situation where you have like a small group of capitalists who own a whole bunch of machines that were made by labor, right? And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about capitalism. And people don't really know. Well, I get what you're referring to here, DM. Yep. The day socialism becomes the law of the land is the day pigs would fly and Antarctica is covered in ice. How's that for a great introduction, bud? How's that for a great introduction? So we are getting to be about that time. I think DM wants to hear it. Hey, Mark, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. I hope you're doing well out where you're at. Socialism and capitalism just dictate who owns the labor. Exactly. People also think, incorrectly, capitalism as static instead of dynamic and evolving. Yeah. Well, capitalism is dynamic and evolving in every way except one. Capitalists will give away everything so long as they maintain control over the means of production. We saw that with FDR, right? All right. You guys have heard this song. If you're in the chat and you haven't heard this song before, I call this the Care Bear Stare against neoliberal capitalism. And one day I hope everyone at least hums this tune. This is called Antarctica is Covered in Ice. asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the red and smoky sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams, where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes and sweeps me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? When everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I think that we can do it. I know that we can do it. Because the solution to the problem couldn't be easier. It couldn't be easier. That the problems that are created from the solution are much more manageable, much easier for us to face than the problems we have created by going to war against the earth itself. That this place was a garden before we got here. It'll be a garden when we're gone. And if we want to witness the absolute miracle that will be the earth healing itself. We don't need to invent something. We don't need to create something. We don't need to do something. What we need to do is stop. And when we do, we will see that the earth was always far more powerful than we are, as we watch it heal itself. And if we want to be here to see it, all we have to do is stop. And that's exactly right, Inquiring. I don't know if we'll make it, but we should try, even if we fail. I want to live in a society, I would prefer to live in a society that is hopelessly, single-mindedly pushing towards a single objective that is for the benefit of all of the people, than to live in this idiotic society that believes it can negotiate with the sun. This society that pretends that, oh, well, as long as these guys over here are super hyper rich and we keep negotiating with the sun while we waste everybody's time working jobs that don't matter. Like, no thank you. Toy Store John, hey there, legend. Make the capitalists beg for mercy. Well, they can beg all they want. My perspective is we gotta get rid of them. That the great failing of the New Deal was that they ultimately allowed the capitalists to continue. Like, they can beg all they want. I am of the opinion that it is time to be rid of them. I want to play another song for you guys. I want to play a song here. Wow, we're getting like a lightning storm here. This is awesome. I wrote this song when I decided to be a communist. Gotta sleep another month inside this car. The wage they pay me with don't get me very far. The chains that hold me break me down, but they don't scar. Can't even drink away my blues inside a bar. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. Another day won't help that pain inside your back. The days get harder, but it's too hard to keep track. They keep you tied before your soul opens a crack. And God don't care what monkeys think about the facts. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. So sit atop your pile of bones and bloody gold, and human sacrifice don't stop you being old. At least you'll die before the bomb you set explodes. We're gonna burn to death while doing what we're told. And this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. Yeah. I know, dude. Crouching. Thanks so much for the comment. That's so sweet of you to say. You should put an album together. You got a few winning songs already. I know. That's like. It's just me. It's just me being stupid about it. And I've been thinking a lot about that recently, actually, Crouching. It's like, why don't I just do it? And it does just come down to a basic doubt. It's just the basic doubt, you know? It's just doubting myself and doubting my capabilities and doubting... Because it's never worked. Like, I've done it before. It doesn't work. But that's not a good reason, right? That's not a good reason to not do it. And I think I've decided I am going to put together, like, an album and then just, like, tell people, like, hey, you know, if you're a Patreon, I'll just give it to you. And then if you want to throw $5 my way, I'll just send you the MP3 files, right? And just make it nice and clean, make it nice and easy for everybody. Because I do think that, like, Antarctica, that one song there, my upstairs neighbor will pound on the floor anytime I play it. Because, and and I was actually holding back on that song. Like, I can, that particular song, if I play that song in public, I can feel it pushing back on the walls. Which I think is great, because I think that the power of that particular song is that it captures the energy of the day, which that's what makes art good art, if you can capture the energy of the day. And yeah, you're right. I should just put it, I should just record it. Honestly, I should just hit the record button on my audio equipment and just get it recorded, so that I have a sound file that I can send to people and all of that kind of stuff, so on and so forth. I know, Crouching, I know. How many songs do I have? I have Class Consciousness is an Awakening After All, Bumble Guppy. Look at you. That's a beautiful sentiment, buddy. That's beautiful. So I got that one. I got This Year Sucks. I got Antarctica. I've got the kind of classic conservative tune that I like to play. I have Some Concerns, which is nice. Why am I blanking? I know I have more than... Oh, I've got this great blues one. I don't remember how it's supposed to be, which is a song that got me through a lot of hard times. I'm going to play that one right now. I wrote this song when I was like 22, and I realized that the capitalist system was never going to deliver on any of its promises. And it's funny how it came about. I was literally reading a comic book, a RoboCop comic book, and the line came out of the CEO of, like, the evil corporation. He said, I know that we had a vision for all of this. I know that we were supposed to be doing good, but I don't remember how that's supposed to be. And it really struck me. So I went home and wrote this. All God's angels, they won't comfort me, won't help me with my heartache, won't help me with my pain. And my demons stopped amusing me. They remind me of my failure, and they'll haunt me till the end. And I don't remember how it's supposed to be. Living life like I was born free. I'm so beat down. I can't find my way up off the ground. And what's a man supposed to do? What's a man gotta say to succeed while still staying true, or to make it safely through each day? And I don't remember how that's supposed to be. Living life like I was born free. I'm so beat down. I can't find my way up off the ground. And all I want with all of my might is to live under God's blue sky. And I'll struggle and work and fight for that right. And I'll be that way until I die. Yes, I will. And all I want is to live like I was born. And all I want is to live like I was born. And all I want is to live like I was born. Born free, yeah, yeah, but I don't remember how that's supposed to be. Living life like I was born free. I'm so beat down. I can't find my way up off the ground. Oh, well, that's nice to hear, Major Hydraulic. I get very that song in particular is the one I'm most nervous to play in front of people, because I think that song I wrote when I was at my most vulnerable, and I worry that people kind of look at that song and go like, "Oh my goodness, it's what a downer, what a downer." And to hear somebody say that you love that one, that's high praise. Thank you so much. Good to see you here. Good to see you here. Toy Star John, you have good, strong vocals. Thank you. Thank you. You can thank the system, the divine system around us for that. I have nothing to do with it. It's just what the randomly generated machine came out with, and so I'm trying to use it to the best I can. You should do one for the housing market crisis next. Yeah, I could call it Crash, right? Crash. Come on down. Boom, 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 crash. So I probably have like 4 or 5 songs. If I started to include covers, like I got a pretty good Nirvana cover. I do some good John Denver stuff, although I don't like doing John Denver tunes because, like, who does John Denver better than John Denver, right? Like, nobody. And that's sort of my feeling. I don't like to do covers of other people's work unless I can do a version of it that becomes its own thing, right? Like, I'm not going to just do a song because it's popular or any of that. I want it to be like Johnny Cash did that with Hurt, right? You want to hear the Nirvana one, Crouching? Sure, bud. Sure. 3 or 5. 3 or 5. How am I feeling today? Let's put it on 5. Let's put it on 5. So this is a great song for all of you out there who have ever had your heart broken, right? My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pine where I would shiver the whole night through. My girl, where will you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. In the pine, where the sun don't ever shine, I would shiver the whole night through. Her husband was a working man, just about a mile from here. They found his head by the driving wheel, but his body was never found. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pine where the sun don't ever shine, I would shiver the whole night through. My girl, where will you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. In the pine where the sun don't ever shine, I would shiver the whole night through. Her husband was a working man, just about a mile from here. They found his head by the driving wheel, but his body was never found. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? I should put it on 3. I should have put it on 3. I put it on 5. I should put it on 3. Hey Lonnie, how you doing? How you doing? The first song I ever sang was in 1969, first grade, Woody Guthrie. This land is your land, this land is my land. This land is your land, this land is my land. Rum ba 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 ba, ba da ba da ba ba, da 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 da. This land was made for you and me. Your voice is so haunting and sometimes raspy in a great way. Great cover. Thank you. Thank you. Haunting is the word. I like that a lot of my music is haunting. Haunting. Because the thing about songs that are haunting is that ghosts haunt and they stick around and people remember them and they stick to people. That's something that I've always known about myself just as a person. Like, I can get a song caught in your head. It's a skill. It's something, I shouldn't say it's a skill. It's a gift. It's just something I have. I can literally walk into a room and sing a song, and 10 minutes later, people are singing that song. It's just something that exists. And so singing songs that are haunting kind of carry that quality, and it's like a spirit that follows you through your life. So it's something I've got to start accepting about myself and accepting that I can do. And I just, you know what I hate? You know what I hate? You know what I really hate? I hate fucking monetizing. I hate monetizing. That's what I hate. I hate that I've got to take music, like literally the gift that life has given us, music, and I've got to monetize it. And if I want to go around singing music, right? Well, I gotta like jangle around a hat or a cup or something and ask for coins in return, and it's annoying. I would much rather those people kept their money. I'd much rather that I was able to play these songs just as the way that they came to me, which is as a gift. And I don't like this idea that it's an exchange of trade, that it's well, I gave you this, now you got to give me that, right? It's just not. I just don't like it. I just don't like it, and I would much rather it just be me sending it into the world as it was given to me, which was freely. Yeah, it feels gross. It feels gross. It just feels dingy. It makes the whole thing, it just makes the whole thing a commodity. Man, there's no way you could be a hobo nowadays just singing for your supper. There's a guy that I walk by who stands outside the LCBO, and that's what he does, and that's what he's always done. He's been there for years. And it's annoying, honestly. It's annoying that he's there. It's annoying that there are people on the streets. And I'm not annoyed because they're because of them. Like, they're doing what they have to do, right? Like, they're doing what they have to do. And I think a lot of times people take their annoyance out on them. I've seen it. Where like I've been walking by people and people will like say shit or do shit and it's just like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Just harassing these people who are just trying to get it by, just trying to get like that little bit extra to be able to buy. Like, there was a woman that I used to walk by on my way home from work every single day, Colleen, who I put in one of my songs. And every single day, I never have change on me, right? I don't carry around change or cash or anything. And but every day I'd walk by her because I stopped by the grocery store to buy something, and I would just say like, hey, do you need anything? And she was always so gracious and always so kind, and she would always just say like, can I get some eggs or can I get like butter or any of that kind of stuff? And so I'd just go in and get some eggs or butter or whatever, right, for her. Maybe sometimes throw in a little treat. I've since moved and I've been laid off from that job, so I haven't seen her in years. And I think about her. I think about Colleen. an elderly woman who is likely disabled, and just the idea that she's sitting on a street corner, just asking the society, hey, if I sit out here and I present myself to you, is that enough? Have I earned my keep now? Now that my suffering is visible to you, now that I've shown it to you, now that I've humbled myself, or humiliated myself if you prefer, to sit down on this street corner with my hat out, begging the society, please, can I have food today? Did I earn it? Because that's the most disgraceful thing that I think I hear come out of liberals and conservatives in the right wing, is the idea that someone needs to earn it, the idea that people who have fallen into poverty deserve it, the idea that it is possible to be undeserving of food and shelter, that we have literally created a system that creates so much food that we throw half of it away, while simultaneously turning around and saying to the people who can't get food from this system that it's their fault. And many of these people are just regular, normal people who have just found themselves on the outs. And it's exactly right, Inquiring. It is intolerable. It's intolerable. I can't stand it. Crouching says, I've done that too, my past jobs. I think about others I've helped, then I move on, sadly. Yeah, you can only do so much. I used to give him free meals when I was at Wendy's to a homeless guy, got caught and fired. Right? Like, how embarrassing can you get, right? Somebody's firing you for giving food to the homeless. Major says, I wish we as a society would just give the homeless everything they needed. Yeah, because then we would give everything to everyone, right? Like, if there was a guarantee that you couldn't be homeless, if it was a guarantee that you always had food, right? I genuinely believe that we would start a golden age. Hey, Loaf, how you doing? This is why the opening of Oscar Wilde's The Soul of Man Under Socialism is so powerful to me. Every day we are confronted by the ugliness of poverty. Socialism would free us of that. Well, and the fear, the thing that always gets piled on to people who say, just house the homeless, right? They always say, well, all people just sit around and be lazy. And it's obviously false, right? It's just that people wouldn't work for capitalists. Like, why would they? Why would anyone work for these capitalists? Like, they're obviously sociopaths. Like, they're obviously nightmare creatures. You're seeing it all throughout the States, right? You're seeing people who are just not showing up any longer because the wage that they're paying doesn't pay the bills anymore. It's simply not worth it. Like, and more people are beginning to see that, like, oh, well, if all working for capitalists does is give me a wage that barely pays a subsistence living, well, I would prefer to have my life. I would prefer to have my life. Yeah, most people think poverty is a personal failing, not the machinations of capital. Yeah, because they've been well trained, right? They've been well trained. Hey, Matthias, how you doing, bud? Yeah, yet they have no problem paying for basic needs for prisoners. Exactly, Matthias. Exactly. Like, if you commit a crime in this society, you are deserving of food and shelter. Like, that's the embarrassing truth of the neoliberal capitalist position. They tell us to earn it. And so, okay, well, one of the ways to earn it is to commit a crime, right? We live in this, like, lawless, incoherent society that demands that we eventually turn to illegal activities in order to earn what should be given freely and what is available openly. The crazy thing is we already have all these programs. We don't have to invent anything new. We just need to expand it to everyone. Exactly. No, exactly. Like, the answers are right in front of us. Like, they're right there. That the issue isn't one of of not understanding or not even knowing anything, right? Like, we have all the information, we have all the, and there are countries that have done it. There are countries that have just done it. And it's not an issue of not having the tools or the understanding. It's literally that our people suck. There's just no other way to say it at this point. Like, we are facing a cultural issue. It's no longer an economic issue, that it is a cultural issue. And that our society is just full of people who want others to suffer. And they want to pay more. That's where it gets truly embarrassing. That the systems we have in place right now to deal with the negative outcomes of poverty cost more than the systems you put in place to eradicate it. And what that means is that the people who are defending the system as it stands now want to pay more for the suffering that it's inflicting. They want to pay more to inflict the suffering. We're not facing an economic issue. We're not facing any kind of scientific issue, anything like that. We are facing a very basic human empathy and compassion issue. That our society has lost its ability to feel compassion and empathy, and we're going to pay heavily for it. There's going to be heavy cost to that. Even working 12 hours a day, 4 times a week, I cannot afford one bedroom barely. Slavery, simple as that. Yeah, bumble guppy. I used to think wage slave was hyperbolic. Anytime this conversation comes up, it always pays to remember the Confederate slavers, right? There's a great book that I have called Cotton is King. I highly recommend everybody look it up. Give it a read, or I'll listen to it on an audiobook. Skip over the chapters where they like list all the bushels of cotton and shit like that. And because they do that, right? That exists. But in it, they very explicitly, like the Confederate slavers of the South understood that there was a system of wage slavery. They argued that chattel slavery was actually a more compassionate and empathetic system from wage slavery, because chattel slaves had to take care of their slaves even when there was no work. So if the work dried up, or if there was a down season, they still had to provide food and shelter for the chattel slave. Whereas a wage slaver could just discard his wage slaves and say, well, go get your own food and shelter elsewhere. I'm no longer paying your wage, right? If the work dries up, they can just lay people off. They can just fire people. They're not responsible for them any longer. And so the Confederates understood that wage slavery existed and that it was real. And in fact, Abraham Lincoln ran on a platform of abolishing wage slavery. That was the platform he ran his campaign on. And that the war between the Confederates of the South and the Northerners, the abolitionists, drained the will of the populace. That getting rid of chattel slavery was seen as a victory unto itself. But they never managed to confront the system of wage slavery. And so one of the things that I try to do regularly is to remind people, like, it's not hyperbolic. If you are being paid a wage, you are a slave to the person paying the wage, but also a slave to the system, right? Because the only recourse you have in the system is to go get another job, right? Which isn't much different than saying go work for another master, right? That the major benefit between the chattel system and the wage slave system is that it's the wage slave that gets to choose when he leaves the master and go find another master. Whereas under the chattel system, it's the master that decides if he wants to sell off the slave. So that is an inversion that's considered a benefit under the wage slave system. But there's no doubt in my mind, like, the system is designed to be a wage slave system. And there are other solutions that they give, like, well, why don't you open up a business? So why don't you become a wage slaver yourself, right? That's what they're saying. And once you understand this, like, once you understand that the system is a slave system, that it perpetuates itself as a slave system, that selling yourself to other people is, even if you're doing it as rent, right, is a form of slavery. That's why I don't like to be paid for my music, because I don't consider myself a slave. And only slaves get paid. I want to live in a world where I can just go around and play this music and play what I want, right? And spread it into the society as a free man. But there's no such thing as free men in a capitalist system. That we are all victims to the system that has been erected explicitly to enslave us. Even the people that we would consider the beneficiaries, in my view, are victims, right? Like, you think about somebody like Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is living in a fantasy land. His whole life has been just this enormous faff, stroking his own ego. I would be surprised to find out that Jeff Bezos knows the first thing about himself. He's just been living in the world as a child, and we've all enabled it. We've all just watched this grown child shoot himself into space because space is cool. Economics is a social science. Money isn't real, yeah. So very true. I've seen a loss of empathy in members of my own family, yeah. Wage slaves have the added responsibility of constantly searching for new masters, exactly. The people need to accept the oligarch will not negotiate. They will only respond with action. I'll only disagree on that statement in one small way, Matthias, which is that the oligarchy will negotiate, right? We've seen them do it. That once we take to the streets and once we take over the streets, they will certainly negotiate. That's the entire Liberal Party, right? The Liberal Party exists as a form of negotiation with the populace to create small piecemeal reforms so that we will not rebel, right? But now we're being ruled by sociopaths, so clearly, somebody said that earlier, that we're clearly being ruled by sociopaths, so they don't even care about the incremental piecemeal reform anymore. And should we take to the streets and actually begin to put pressure on the oligarch class, they absolutely will negotiate. If I raise the wage to $20 an hour, will you stop rebelling? Right? Oh, if I give you a 4-day work week, will you stop rebelling? They will negotiate on every point but one, which is who owns the means of production. And as long as we're willing to disperse from the piecemeal negotiation that they hand us, they'll do it. Which is why we need to just pull them out at the root, right? That the oligarch class needs to be pulled out at the root, that the means of production must be seized, that these worthless capitalists should be told to go get a job, just like the rest of us, and the means of production should be put into the hands of the workers, right? But that's how we rid ourselves of the capitalist class. And they will absolutely negotiate to ensure that doesn't happen. It's all just hegemony, John, like Antonio said. This is what libertarians don't understand. They talk about freedom, but their freedom is the freedom to be a wage slave or starve. I actually have a video that explicitly states it. Here's the great Noam Chomsky talking about exactly that point. I'm going to go run off, have a little bit of a break. I'll let Noam do the talking.
Look, just think about it for a minute. Almost everybody spends most of their life living in a totalitarian system. It's called having a job. When you have a job, you're under total control of the masters of the enterprise. They determine what you wear, when you go to the bathroom, what you do. The very idea of a wage contract is selling yourself into servitude. These are private governments. They're more totalitarian than governments are.
But they can't legally murder you or imprison you.
They can't legally murder you, but they can control everything that you do. Okay?
Well, again, the right-wing libertarian argument would be, well, you're free to leave at any time.
Yes, you're free to starve. That's exactly right. You have a choice between starving or selling yourself to a tyranny. Very libertarian. The right-wing libertarians, whatever they believe, are actually deep authoritarians. They're calling for subordination to private tyrannies, the worst kind of tyrannies.
Noam Chomsky has been taking some critiques recently for various reasons, but I think that we should. He's always been an ally, and it's something that we should always be paying attention to what Noam Chomsky has to say. Socialism can provide true, concrete freedom. Yeah, it does have that potential, certainly. The Chrystia Freeland budget said back to slavery. Yeah, that's what I meant by respond with action. Yeah, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to remove the supports they've put in. They want to remove the supports we've put in. They want to sell us back to a system of neoliberal capital slavery. That's what they want. That's the objective of the Liberal Party. That the supports that they put in were always intended to be temporary because they couldn't bear the thought of throwing a bunch of people into the streets. That the cost of dealing with the hardship of abandoning the populace is far greater than the costs of just putting in a support system. Like, the United States is going to spend like an enormous amount of money to try to alleviate the homelessness problem that it's created, right? And so will Canada. If we continue to pull back on the support systems that we desperately need, that more and more I'm beginning to see as how you actually build an economy. You don't start building an economy by giving money to a bunch of slavers who then go and slave portions of the populace, right? That's not how you build an economy. You build an economy by giving everyone access to food and shelter first, that you provide for the needs of the populace first, and if they don't want to do the work that you tell them to do, well, then the work that you want done is illegitimate on the face of it. That this has always been the concern of the ruling class is, well, how do you get people to do the work that nobody wants to do? Well, sorry to say it, but if nobody wants to do it, then it's probably not valuable to the populace, right? Why don't you go do that work? How come these neoliberal businessmen aren't going down to the mines and pulling up copper and shit, right? How come they're not doing it? If it's so valuable to do, if it's so important that it gets done, then how come they don't go do it? Oh, interesting. You've got to put it in front of them to make them uncomfortable. A lot of us will be in the streets soon enough. Well, in my view, it is an inevitability, right? Like it's just how much hardship are we willing to tolerate? How much hardship are we willing to tolerate? It is interesting that all parties seem to be completely quiet right now on the CERB ending, or at least the media is keeping it out of sight. Yeah. Even Jagmeet is quiet on the CRB. Well, Jagmeet will take credit for it being as good as it is. People throwing gravel at Trudeau today in London, yeah. Yeah, they're probably all in the mines, but they're so hyper-productive you can't even see them. Exactly, Duke. You're nailing it. They're hyper-productivity, exactly. They're definitely worth 3,000 times more than the average worker, right? That's definitely the case. Stuff like this, as we talk about the billionaire class, truly reveals the sort of childish, like, I can't imagine wanting to extend my life. Like, this place isn't that great. Right? That this kind of thing comes from a deep existential fear and a mistrust of the system that created him. Everyone is born, everyone lives for a moment, and then everybody dies. That's the system. And this desire to flee from that, the desire to thwart death, right? In my view, is very childish. Very childish. Yeah, we really don't want these capitalists living longer. Jesus. Yeah, exactly. And I can't help but feel that a person who would like willingly do this to themselves is a person who is not right with the world around them, right? That the world around them has their own ideas as to how this system works. And do we really want like a 200-year-old senile, demented sociopath with most of the power in the economy making decisions about who lives and who dies? Is that really what we're interested in? We're really a big fan of that? That's the big plan for them, extended life. That's why they want most of us dead. I can't imagine a greater hell for these guys. Like, all of their solutions are always... All of their solutions are always like a perfect manifestation of hell. Right? Like the bunkers. Right? Billionaires build bunkers. Like, okay. So our planet becomes desertified, right? People can't live. Billionaires escape to bunkers. What a perfect punishment for them. To live in this hellish place of their own creation until the day that they die. Right? Like, they'll probably kill each other first. Like, there's a great movie to make. Make a movie about the billionaires escaping to their bunkers. Right? Reveal how hellish it would be for them. And it would be. Because they're sociopaths. Like, they're sociopathic children. They literally can't take care of themselves. They lack basic empathy and compassion. How long until they turn on each other? Right? How long until it's literally just one guy by himself in a corpse-ridden bunker being inflicted by the existential spirits that exist within each and every one of us? Like, go lock yourself in a room. Like, really. I actually highly advise that everybody actually try to do this, because it's very revealing. And it's something that we don't do as a people. Go lock yourself in a room for a day. For one day. Right? Ask yourself how long it would take before you went insane. I think for most people it would be about 6 days. I think most people would lose their mind in about 6 days. And that's exactly right. They will inherit a wasteland. They think they will be fine because they will just be replaced by perfectly obedient robots. Like, that way madness lies, right? Like, it's just a complete and total form of absolute madness. And like, I look at this kind of thing where, like, Jeff Bezos funding a lab to extend his life. Like, dude, you're not going to be very happy with your quality of life. I hate to say it, right? Like, I used to work in funeral services. I went into a lot of old folks' homes. I went into a lot of hospitals. I know exactly what old age looks like. It's not pleasant. And you're telling me that you want to extend that? Okay. So you want to create like a little hell for yourself. It's like these people who say that they want to download their consciousness into a machine. I can't imagine a better version of hell than downloading your consciousness into some kind of machine. Like, you're literally in hell. Like, that's just like a perfect articulation of hell. That your sensory inputs, the idea that a robot is going to have better sensory inputs than what the natural world has created for you is kind of an embarrassment, right? That I actually genuinely believe that a person who downloaded their consciousness into like a robot, let's say, no matter how good the robot looked, no matter how good the sensors were, all that kind of stuff, would beg for death almost immediately. That the experience would be so horrible and hellish for them that they would beg for death. It would be the first thing that would spring to their mind. Why would anyone think that living within the shell of a machine is a good thing? And it really, really tells you, how little these billionaires actually think about the system that they live in, right? That they genuinely think that these are good ideas. Like, follow through on it, man. Like, follow through on it. I bet you if you took one of these billionaires and you locked him in the bunker, like, let's do a test. You've got this bunker. Let's lock you in it. Who do you want to be in the bunker with? Let's lock you in it. How long do you want to be in the bunker for? Let's do a trial run. I think they would be down there for about a week before they had the realization that this is a fucking terrible idea. I would prefer to die in a climate change apocalypse than get locked in a bunker. Like, no thanks. No thanks, man. I have respect for my existential self. I have respect for the deep void that exists within each one of us. I have respect for the infinite depth of our imagination and our mental capacity. I have respect for that. Bezos doesn't. Bezos is a fucking disconnected idiot. Hey, Noel, how you doing? They started this climate crisis, now they're scared. Yeah. How long before the guards turn? Exactly. How long before the guards turn on them? How long before their servants turn on them? How long before their own family turns on them? Yeah, it's not hard to figure out, and it's not fiction, right? But even if they didn't, right? Even if this small group of humans actually managed to like peacefully live in this environment, wouldn't be nice. You'd be mainly dealing with yourself most of the time. And that's something that I say. I don't know if I say it that often on this channel, but I definitely believe it, which is that the hardest thing that a person has to do is deal with themselves. It's the most difficult thing to do, which in my view is why we tolerate so much bullshit in the real world. Because all the bullshit that we're tolerating out in the real world is easier. It's easier to be distracted. It's easier to put up with all of this nonsense and all of this bullshit because the alternative is dealing with ourselves. And I know people, who I have looked at and been like, man, if you were put in a position where all you had to do is deal with yourself, I don't think you could do it. That this sort of manic capitalist system has swept them away and has allowed them to externalize their own personality. And they never need to actually think about their internal self. And they never actually need to deal with themselves because they have been swept away on this other journey of capital. They've gone down a rabbit hole. And that if you took them and you said, okay, all of that is gone, right? All that exists in this space is you. Deal with yourself. I don't think they could do it. Because the hardest thing to do on this plane of reality is to deal with yourself. Which is why I think it's so important that we create systems and structures to allow people to deal with themselves. Because that's where the real work lives. That's where the hard work lives. The hard work lives in dealing with yourself. And if we let people actually do it, then we'd end up with a better society. We'd end up with better people. Right? That like the Jordan Petersons of the world say, oh, well, clean up your room and like take care of your own household. But like he doesn't respect the fact that we don't exactly have a system that allows that to happen, do we? We don't exactly have a system that gives people the opportunity to deal with their own house. That you're forced out the door to go work for some guy you'll never meet, right? But that's the system. And if you don't have respect for the system that you live in, and you don't really have respect for the individual that you profess to want to improve the life of, and then you stop eating your vegetables and you go into a coma. Yeah, imagine not being able to die, right? Like that's a big yikes. Yeah, exactly. People think machines holding their consciousness is Control X and it's just Control C. Yeah. I think it would be a horror show. I think it would be horrific. And I don't think it would be horrific because the person would become a robotic sociopath or anything like that. I think the experience of it. Like, I genuinely think that a big reason why we haven't seen like a film version of what we're talking about, someone downloads their consciousness into a robot and the consequences of that, what is that? Like, the reason why there isn't like a good articulation of that process is because I think it is an experiential process. That the person who experienced it would live in hell. It would just be hell. It would just be like a deadening of the self and a deadening of the systems, like a full-scale detachment from the life force. I just think it would be hell, and I think a person who found themselves in a position would want it to stop almost immediately. So I don't think that you could make a film about it because it would be very like. I think you could write a short story or a book about it, though. right? I think that I do believe that there are authors out there who could capture the insanity of the process, right? I believe that the human imagination could capture it and put it into words in a way that would facilitate the imagination of others to be able to get into that place. And I think that the people who read such a story and that the person who wrote such a story would be heavily marked by it. Because even the simple contemplation of what it would be like, right? Like, it's beyond our imagination. Like, we're so used to, like, I can feel the air with my hand when I go like this. Right? Here's a very basic thing of what I'm talking about, right? I literally feel it. I feel the pressure of the air, right? I feel as my hand moves through it, that information goes up into my brain, it's processed, all that kind of stuff. And that's all naturally built in. The process of breathing, for God's sakes, the process of breathing, right? The having sexual organs, right? You guys, you know me, right? I got my chakra system right back there, right? Where does action originate from? It doesn't originate from your brain. It originates from your pelvis, where your genitals live, right? We always make that joke that, like, always thinking with the wrong head. Well, that's because everybody does, because that's where action originates from. It doesn't start here. It starts there, and then it goes up. And you're telling me that you're going to take this and transfer it into a robot and detach this from all of that, and you're not going to instantly believe that you're in hell and wish to be dead. Okay, champ. you go off to the races, bud. And these guys just don't realize that what they're doing is they're building their own hell, right? And, like, there is a little part of me that's just like, okay, bud, like, I hope you achieve your goals, so that when you're like 80 or 90 or like 150 or whatever, you realize, like, Jesus, I've created my own personal hell. Because that's essentially what they're doing, right? Like, that's essentially what the billionaire class is doing. They're creating hell. What is climate change but the bringing of hell? No, you've said, if we all had to enter the same elder care system and all were treated the same regardless of their wealth or position, just imagine how well cared for we would be. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, oh, it turns out that egalitarianism actually works. Old people having a place in community as a norm. Yeah, at least pet sitting. Yeah. Well, and I do find, like, there is this, like, we want to invisibilize the elderly. We want to invisibilize it. We want to not look at it. Because it's hard. It's hard to witness. Like, the decline is real, right? And it's difficult to witness, and it's difficult to acknowledge in ourselves that is the road that we are all walking, right? But instead of facing that reality like adults and acknowledging that that's the case and saying to one another, like, these people should be part of our community, we should live that journey. The Japanese have in Japanese theater, there's a really beautiful philosophy called the way of the flower, that it's broken into 4 parts, that a flower begins as a seed, right? And this would be the youth, right? The very young toddlers and such. And then it grows into a stem, right? Which is adolescence and being a young person, right? Then you go through your middle age life, and that's the blooming of the flower, right? And then the flower withers away and dies, and that's old age and death. And that's built into their entire theatrical system, this idea of the way of the flower, and that every segment of that process is beautiful in its own right. That you're not lamenting the withering of the flower, that withering is part of the natural cycle of what life is and should be celebrated in its own right. And we don't do that. We take the withering process and we shove it away. And we worship, like, celebrities that are jamming Botox and shit into their face, like this perpetual desire to maintain your eternal youth. And I'm just like, Like, we're a very childish culture in that regard. Like, why shouldn't... Like, there's this great thing that happens in Japanese theater. So it used to be, and before the modern era, of course, it used to be that theater could only be performed by one family, right? That it was actually an art form that was done by a single family. And if you, as an outsider, wanted to partake as an actor or something like this, you had to be adopted into the family. And this family would, every single year, put on a presentation. And the show was always the same, right? Like, they bring out the young kids, and they would come out, and it would be like a row of young kids, and they would do their stupid lines and just be like, yeah, bo ba ye ga do da. But they're like kids, right? So they suck, obviously. And then you would have like the love story, and then you'd have all this kind of stuff, and it would go through the ages, and the story would unfold from the young to the adolescent all the way up the chain until finally you end up with the oldest actor, who likely was doing his last performance because he's getting to be that age. And what they had is they had a cliffside with a piece of armor built into it, with a sword standing up into the sky. And this old man would essentially be strapped into the armor because he's so old now. And he'd be raising the sword up to the sky, and he delivers a speech about how good his life was and how good life is, and how he looks forward to face his maker with dignity and respects the life that he has been given. And what's so beautiful about this process is that it's the same group of people doing the same show every year to be watched by the same people. So year by year, you are watching these people grow up and play different roles and go up. And within your entire life, you can see a person go from being a middle-aged man to ascend the top of the cliff and hold the sword. And realize within that process that you yourself are on that same journey. It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. Just a full acceptance of the cycle of life, a full acceptance of what it means to be alive, to be a person in the world, that we in the Western culture have completely invisibilized. We live in a state of total denial. We don't want to admit that we are, each of us, ascending that cliff. And each of us will have our moment where we will raise the sword of our own death above our heads. That journey is built into the system itself. And by our refusal to actually pay attention to it and our denial of it, we have turned ourselves into children who can't handle being alive. And this allows the dumbest things to happen in our society. Our society is full of dumb people, right? Like, our society, especially Western society, is full of just dumb people who lack even the most basic ability to articulate even the most basic emotional state of themselves. Because we've detached ourselves entirely from the reality that, hey, you're a randomly generated person. You didn't ask to be here, right? So nobody asked to be here. Nobody knows why they are what they are. Right? Why am I a white man who was born in the prairies of Canada at this moment in time? Right? Doesn't matter. None of that matters. We didn't ask for it. Here we are. You go through your life, and the promise of this, the absolute built-in promise, is that you are going to age, and you are going to wither, and you are going to die. That's a guarantee. And we don't pay any attention to it at all. It's the number one truth of our reality. It's the number one truth of our reality, and we completely fucking ignore it. How can we live that way? How can any creature live that way in this state of total denial? Any society or culture that arises from such a delusionary state is destined to collapse and fail because the natural systems of the universe and the world are far more powerful than such a society or a people. And we're going to watch it in real time. Like, let's say Jeff Bezos manages to achieve his goals. I can't wait to see the strange little vampire that gets created from this. The odd little gremlin. The just completely empty, withered away husk of a human being. Oof. Whose only objective is to just cling tightly to something that was already gone, that was predestined, that was preordained to be gone. That if we talk about fate, well, each of us carry a fate with us, don't we? Each of us carry a fate with us. And we just pretend like we don't. Also, the billionaires that want to go to space, yeah, they'll be stuck in a metal coffin in the cold darkness of space. Yeah, exactly. Or like go to Mars, right? Like Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. It's like, okay, bud, if you say so, dude. I just don't want to suck on the coconut man's graying anatomy. We're already doing that, yeah. It's hard to clean your room if you're homeless. Nice, yeah. Downloading yourself into a robot would be a good episode of Black Mirror. I just don't think that they would be able to capture it. I just don't think that film or television would be able to capture it because it's such a personal and experiential thing. So they'd end up having to be like, he just goes mad, right? And it's like, I guess. The most inspiring qualities of old age are grace and humility. Yeah? Step aside and admit you no longer know what people are doing or where they are going and be okay with it. Exactly. I feel like people who are in a state of old age have much larger concerns, right? Like the concerns of young people and the concerns of the middle-aged are like going here and going there and dealing with the society and all of this. People who are in old age, they have much larger concerns. Right? The journey for an elderly man between his bedroom and the bathroom is a much larger struggle and a much larger battle than the journey of a young man from his home to his workplace. We just don't respect it. I heard that they're thinking about covering mountains and ice with these reflective blankets to at least mitigate climate change. Yeah. Like, their ideas are turning into, like, literal James Bond villain shit. We're going to fill the atmosphere with an isotope that will reflect the solar energy off of the thingamajig and will certainly not have any negative consequences whatsoever. I know what we should do. We should erect a big dish and cover the sun so that we're in a constant state of solar eclipse. That will certainly not create any negative consequences whatsoever. Like, and what's so stupid about all of that? Like covering the mountain's ice with reflective blankets or geoengineering or any of this kind of stuff, is that it's all just the desperate whinging of a people who don't want to accept that your ideas suck. Stop doing stuff. Plant trees. That's it. Plant trees, stop polluting. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. No, we don't need your stupid high-tech bullshit. No, we don't need any of that. Your stupid high-tech bullshit is how we got into this problem. Right? To me, that's like not much different from a guy being like, I know how to stop doing heroin. I'll do more heroin. No. Nah. You just gotta stop. And yeah, Bumbleguppy, you're hitting it. Running out of ideas that aren't dismantling capitalism. Exactly. Local CPC candidate says she has time for an interview Friday. Am I available? What time? Send me an email. It's write this down, Nova Scotia. Tell me when you've got a pen, okay? And write it down. Just popped in, John. What are your current spiritual beliefs? Andrew Smith. Let me just, I'm going to answer some other stuff first, bud, and then I'll go into it, okay? Oh, I just want to say that Jeff Bezos is a symptom or a product of the capitalist system, so I see his story as a tragedy. I agree. I agree with you on that, Noel. We are all victims, including people like Bezos. We are all victims. That I feel like if you were actually to tell the story of Jeff Bezos, it would be a tragedy. I see meditation as practice for being dead. Yeah, there's a bit of that. Read Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Excellent book. We are all the same. I think my own mortality sometimes, John, I have to be honest, I'm actually not scared of death personally. This is all flowing into the same stuff now. We're all asking the same kind of questions. So just let me get through all this quick. Yeah, capitalism can't produce the problems that it causes. It's like saying that a fire will build a building, right? Like it's just not what it is. Hey, Aga, how you doing? Better late than never, exactly. Trees are a great answer. Okay, you guys want me to go into the big question, the spiritual beliefs. So my background is evangelical Christianity, right, which I no longer have any longer, the evangelical side of it at least. I like to, I love telling people that I'm a secular theologian because I love the confusion that creates. It's so nice. I have an enormous amount of respect for religious texts. I have an enormous amount of respect for people who read and consume and write religious texts because we are, by our very definition, existential spiritual creatures, that we exist as existential spiritual creatures. And once you root everything in the understanding, like the modern quantum science says that we are one energy. So even if you're a hard-nosed atheist, you live in a one energy system. That's the theory. That's quantum mechanics. That's Western society, right? That's not like Hindus. That's not like ancient knowledge. That's literally the most modern cutting edge science we have is telling us that we are a singular energy, right? And I always love to ask, okay, well, is that singular energy, do we think it's sentient or not? Which is a kind of a take on, like, does God exist? Which is a question I hate asking because it always turns into a dead end. It always turns into semantics. Like, the people who say, no, God doesn't exist are saying, like, no, there isn't a man that lives in the universe that is bestowing wishes and things. It's, like, literally not what any theologian has ever said. And then the theologians, what they've been saying the whole time, like you can go read the theological tracts written by Isaac Newton. One of the great theologians is Sir Isaac Newton, right? Thomas Aquinas, Saint Augustus. They all said that when we're talking about God, we're talking about like the collection of all things, right? The collection of all things, this oneness that we all experience, this one energy that quantum mechanics now reveals and says to us that is accurate. That is how things are. And so I begin to ask this simple question of like, okay, well, certainly that one energy exists. And so what the ancient theologians and like what the Enlightenment theologians were saying seems to bear out, that we live in a singular energy, and that singular energy is what's responsible for creating and sustaining us, that we are all just energy vibrating at a level that we get to take form and experience one another as in this illusion of individualism, right? And it is an illusion of individualism. Like, we aren't individuals. We are a single energy communicating with itself, attempting to discover what the fuck this is. One of the great, one of the places I actually disagree with the theologians on is this idea that this energy is all-knowing and all-powerful and all that kind of stuff. And certainly it must have a level of power that we don't know anything about. But in terms of all-knowing, I don't think it knows what's going on. I think that it created all things as a byproduct of its own existence. That it came into being and just kind of asked the question, what am I capable of doing? The way that a deer does, when a deer is born into the world, it starts to find its feet and figure out, well, what am I capable of doing, right? Every creature seems to ask that question intrinsically built inside of itself. And so a being that is capable of creating all things that are logically possible to be created doesn't do so with forethought and thinking, the way that we like illustrate like the old man God building humans, right? It just creates all things that are possible of being because it can. And so it did. And it's only after all of these things get created that it turns around and says, wait, what is good? What is evil? What are you even talking about? Right? And that it is discovering itself as we are discovering it. Right? That maybe in like in the long form, like the idea that it's outside of time and it does have all this collection of stuff and it does have all of that knowledge and capability. In that way, it's all-knowing. But to know things, you have to go through it. And so does my creator know what's about to happen next in my life any better than I do? I don't think so. I don't think so. Because I'm experiencing it as it's experiencing it. Because I am a part of it and it's a part of me. And you are a part of it and it is a part of you. And so when I finish this stream, I always say the same thing, right? I always say that you are a divine being standing in divine energy. And that's true. And we are equals in that. That as much as the right-wing people like to say, like, oh, well, no, there are differences. Like, women can have children and men have this and all that stuff. But, okay, like, that's all sort of, in my view, that's all very superficial. Like, that's just skin deep, right? Like, that's just like, oh, my skin is white, your skin might be black, right? Like that's just the thinnest layer of illusion that exists, right? And what's going on beneath that? What's going on beneath our own structure, right? And if we well, if God knows the future, then how do we have free will? I've never gotten a straight answer to this question. When I ask religious people, they seem to dance around the question. I have two kind of things to say about that, which is, first of all, like when I say that all things that are possible to exist do, that also includes the multiverse, right? There is such a thing as a multiverse theory. We've all seen Rick and Morty, right? They delve into it. Every decision you've ever made in your life where you have said yes or no, both of those happen. There's a universe that exists beside this universe where and in the Rick and Morty sense, for storytelling purposes, they make the differences between the universes very extreme, right? Like a universe where Hitler was killed or something, right? But the truth of the matter is that there are universes that exist beside one another, and I use the term beside because I don't know how else to articulate it, but they exist beside one another, and the only difference between this universe and the universe that exists beside this one is that I say a different number than the number 4 right now. And that's it. That's the only deviation, right? That there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe all the way down to 100 billion, for all it matters, right? Such is the infinite potential of the quantum signature. And if there are deviations, like, well, where do those deviations occur? Why do they occur? Like maybe I say the number, in one of those universes, I say a number and that triggers somebody to remember something. Like maybe Loaf suddenly goes like, oh, that reminds me, I need to call my mom or something, right? And so those deviations are subtle. And there may be a universe beside this one in which that deviation results in nothing, right? That it doesn't deviate in a matter that manifests itself in any difference whatsoever. So there's literally universes beside universes that are fundamentally the same except these minor deviations. And that's true of every single life form and every single creature that exists in all of existence through all of time. It's massive. It's massive. It's beyond our comprehension, right? That even the people who are living within the space, like your writers of Rick and Morty or any of that kind of stuff, do not comprehend the massive scale of it. That it is enormous. as to the question of free will. Does someone have free will within a system in which all choices and which all decisions do happen? Right? Anytime you are presented with a choice, that choice does happen, whether or not you choose it or not. Right? What matters is just your experience. And honestly, I always like to say to people who are walking around saying that they have free will, I always say to them, like, oh, okay, let's just say that you have free will. You have the capacity to make decisions for yourself. Okay. To me, this is not much different than a single grain of sand upon the ocean floor saying to itself, I have free will. And as the ocean currents come and pick that grain of sand up off the ocean floor, and it floats throughout the ocean on the ocean currents, believing in its free will, that it will wash up along the beaches and the sunlight will beam down upon it, and it will say, ah yes, here I am on these beautiful beaches, on this sandy shore, because of my free will. So, if you want to hold on to that little thought of yourself, if it gives you comfort, you're welcome to. But I believe that your free will matters as much to you and to me and to everyone else as the free will of that tiny little grain of sand upon the ocean floor. Do you think there is an afterlife, or is it, as Richard Dawkins says, eternity under a general anesthetic? I hope there's not an afterlife, dude. I just hope that this is it. I don't want to keep going on like this, being like, hi, I'm John Sanderson, this is who I am, and all that kind of stuff. Mark Twain said something that I thought was very profound. And he said it in regards to the fear of death, but I think it has something to say about our experience and our as beings, right? He said, I didn't much mind when I wasn't born, so I don't think I'll much mind when I'm dead. And I do think that what happens to us is much the same in how a musical note stops playing, that the music plays and the vibration ends and the note simply fades into the whole. And that as we die, we return back to the one energy, that whatever energy exists within us and whatever's propelling us dissipates and goes down, and we simply melt back into the oneness. And I think we'll rather be fond of it. I think that melting back into the oneness will be quite pleasant. Because this is tough. Being alive is tough, eh? Like, being alive is not pleasant. We don't like it. Not really. It's kind of a novelty. There's sort of a novelty to it. There are moments, right? There are moments, certainly. Sex. We all like that, right? The moment of creation, the moment of reproduction. Right? We're all fans. Seems important. Those sorts of moments. Any kind of experience we have of other things within the world, right? Experiencing art, experiencing flavor, taste is a big one. Feeling something soft, warmth, all of these kinds of things. And they're all intrinsically tied to experiencing the creation of the one energy as it has manifested itself in this kind of world. But this place is also very difficult to be in. I think that's why we die, because it's kind of a pain in the ass to keep this thing going, right? Especially with the rules being as they are. Like, perhaps we would think differently if there wasn't this growth and this plateau and then a wither. Right? If we were eternal beings, right? We might think of things slightly differently. But we live as we do, and that's all that we know. And I think so too, Inquiring. I think that when we die, we simply cease to exist, and I don't think it's going to be a big problem. I don't think that that creates any kind of existential dread. I don't think that creates any kind of like horror show or anything like that. I think that it's just very simply, I am here. I am who I am. I was created to experience this moment in time from this perspective, as I am. And when my race is run, when my journey is over, it will cease. Just as a music note ceases playing. We don't grieve musical notes. We don't grieve when the painter's brush is lifted from the canvas. So I don't see any reason to grieve that my life is not somehow in an eternal state forever. It seems odd, in a way, to think that in some capacity I will continue on eternally. Oh, I hope not. Oh, I hope not. Perhaps the multiverse is made up of every configuration of atoms that can exist, do exist. Yeah, I think that's right. If there is a part of my brain that has free will, it isn't something that is part of my awareness. I can't know or control my next thought will even be. That's an excellent observation, Null. That, like, we are really just dealing with ourselves. That, like, images flood up into our consciousness all of the time. Have you ever just been walking down the street, you've been having a fine time, and then suddenly an image or a memory of something really stupid you did when you were younger just comes and whacks you? Do people genuinely think they have free will? And if they do, then are we all masochists? Do you genuinely believe that a person who has free will would just be walking down the street getting whacked with the worst aspects of themselves from their own past? Seems a bit, I don't know. We like to pretend like we have a lot of control, and we don't. We really don't. And we as people seem to think, like, especially Westerners, have a very inverted viewpoint of how existence works in the first place. We think that things start here. We genuinely think that we live here, and that I send impulses to my hands, and those impulses, I grab the mouse, I grab this thing, I grab the lighter, right? And it's very, like, mechanical. And it's just literally not how it works. That we begin by experiencing things. That experience comes at us. We feel things first. That feelings come into us and on us. And the impulses that we have, right, come from inside of our body, right? Like, I find it very strange that we're walking around talking about having free will while simultaneously being bound to a body that gets fucking horny. Right? That, like, we literally can live in an environment where we will see a person and be like, yeah, and, like, go towards that person with the desire to engage in sexual activity while simultaneously saying, yeah, I've got free will. Okay, buddy. Like, okay, champ. We are very much bound to the environment and our impulses and our internal selves and all of this. And most of our life's journey is about seeking a path to being able to, if not control it, I don't like using the word control, but certainly to deal with it, right? Certainly to deal with it. That and people do have to learn to deal with things, right? One of my favorite observations of the chakra system is that the chakra system says that the energy comes from your pelvis and it goes up your belly, right, into your solar plexus, into your heart, and then into your throat first, which means thoughts come from your dick and they go out your mouth before they even hit your brain. So you need to teach yourself to think before you speak. Yeah, why would I want to spend eternity with murderers and rapists who repented before their deaths? Capitalism is hell enough. Screw the afterlife, yeah. Brought into existence without consent. Well, I mean, what does the quantum energy care about our desires or wishes? It's completely beside the point. Like the quantum energy or God, if you prefer, or any of that kind of stuff is just like, it doesn't. Your feelings of it don't really matter. You know? Why should I fear death? If I am, then death is not. Death is, then I am not. Why should I fear that which can only exist when I do not? Epicurus. Yeah. Some of those ancient Greeks, man, they had it. Like, they knew what was up. Like, Aristotle knew what was up. Like, these guys knew what was up. You ever think a thought that completely disgusts you? Of course, right? I think that's just part of being alive, right? And you're just sort of looking at yourself and going, what the fuck? What the fuck just happened? What? Why did I even do that? Daniel Dennett believes that we have free will in the sense that we have degrees of freedom. I think that's because, like, the problem I have with a lot of the quote-unquote new atheists, right, is that they don't actually read the theology and they don't actually know anything about it. And so their perception of what is being talked about, and to their credit, like, to be fair, it's not as though there's a strong theological movement throughout the United States and the Western world generally, right? The evangelicals have completely distorted everything. They've completely fucked everything up. And so, men like Daniel Dennett or Richard Dawkins, who I think are very intelligent, very, very intelligent, worth paying attention to, right? But their view of what it is to be alive within this system is a bit smothered. It's a bit smothered, right? That their view of things is a bit reduced, right? Because they don't really acknowledge or admit that we live in this system of energy, right? We live in a system of one energy, and that one energy created us and sustains us, right? And when we die, we return to that energy. They don't really accept that that's true. And if you don't accept that that's true, then you can kind of say what you like, right? And you can tell that that's the way they think. Like, they'll say things like the spaghetti monster, right? The spaghetti monster was a big one that came out of this the new atheist movement. But, like, the spaghetti monster is a being that lives in outer space, that is bound to the confines of the universe, that is itself a being within the universe. Has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. But that's what they'll continuously go back to. Oh, you believe in God, so you believe in a spaghetti monster. It's like, literally no. Like, it has nothing to do with what's being talked about. Like, to me, that's not much different than saying, like, oh, you like the color red, then you must like bananas. Like, it's just a nonsensical non sequitur that doesn't make any sense to me. Most of the new atheists, with the exception of Dennett, are greedy reductionists. I mean, Dawkins did create the meme. No, and this is what I mean. Like, I don't like looking at the new atheists with a too negative viewpoint, right? That they are, in the end, explorers, right? And why would an explorer want to go down a path that isn't particularly well lit? Especially, like, the work of theology is very difficult. It's very difficult work. And I mean, like, it's not like the theological tradition in North America and throughout Europe is very strong, right? Like, that because it's not very strong and also not very well respected, nobody really knows much about it, honestly. And, like, but you read the works of, like, it's so odd to me, especially when it comes to Isaac Newton, right? Like, have a good one, Noel. Have a good one, bud. Thanks for being in here. Like, Isaac Newton, like, all of these scientists today are like, oh, Isaac Newton, the most brilliant genius that ever lived, calculus and all of this kind of stuff. He was a very strong and powerful theologian. He wrote many theological tracts, right? Read them. They're available. Like, the guy that you venerate, the guy who created modern calculus, all this kind of stuff, well, he espoused a doctrine of God. Maybe read it. and then connect that doctrine, that those theological tracks, to what we know about quantum mechanics, right? They align very closely. They align very closely to one another. And once you do that, then works like the works of Thomas Aquinas and works like the work of St. Augustus, if you want to stay in the Western tradition, because there are others, like there are great Hindu tracts and great Islamic tracts and things like this on these subjects. But if you want to keep it in the Western tradition, right, Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustus, the Gnostics, they all write with the full understanding that, yeah, when we talk about God, we're talking about this one energy that we live in. Like, read the book of Job, for goodness sakes. Like, the Bible itself is fairly explicit that, like, God is not a being that lives within the confines of the universe. That God is the universe and is all creation, right? I think even Darwin was religious till he was 40, but then dropped it on his deathbed. Well, Darwin's an interesting figure in that regard because his discoveries went against what the popular theology was. And the popular theology has still infected like the evangelical movements of today, which is that there's a duality, that there's that there's us and then there's God, right? And that's not how I see things. That we are all one and the same, right? Like, much in the way that Christ was a son of God, well, so too am I, and so too are you, right? Sons and daughters of the Creator. That we're all part of this energy together, experiencing it all simultaneously, attempting to discover what it is, attempting to discover what's its purpose, what's its point. And instead of focusing on that, we're just like making lattes for one another and shit. Yeah, exactly. Newton believed that exploring nature through math and the scientific method brings you closer to understanding God. Exactly. Once he understood evolution, he realized it was BS from his writings. Yeah, like, and Augustus, actually, I keep talking about Augustus because he has very important quotes and things to say. He said that if dogma is ever confronted by evidence, then the dogma must go, lest it destroy the entire movement. That religion is not there to countervail scientific discovery. That scientific discovery augments our religious understanding, not the other way around. That evidence is what needs to prevail. And if I have had moments in my life. A great example is drug use. Right? I come from country evangelical Christianity, right? And so I believed for a long time that drugs are bad, they should be criminalized, right? People should be punished, all this kind of stuff. But then the evidence comes out, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. If you actually care about reducing drug use and reducing all that kind of stuff, then you need to legalize it. That's what the evidence says. And I had a moment where it was like, oh, I could focus on the evidence, or I could focus on my own ideological belief system. And, you know, if you want to maintain intellectual credibility, you have to accept the evidence as it is. And so I did. I like the idea of us being a way for the universe to know itself. Because in my view, that is fundamentally what it is. Not what else are we but the imagination of the universe, right? The imagination of the quantum signature. Because universe... What I love, so Dawkins has been confronted with this idea, right? He was confronted with the idea by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Atkinson, I believe his name was, who kind of articulated what I'm articulating now, that God and the universe are one and the same. And so Dawkins said, well, why call it God? Why not just stick with universe? And Atkinson didn't really answer it. There was like a tittering in the crowd, and they kind of moved on. But the answer is that, like, well, the word universe itself contains the answer to the question. Uni, one, verse, word, right? That this system that we live in here, this universe, is but just one word from the mouth of God. That the old theologians understood the idea of the multiverse. They understood that, and this is just one of them. And of course, because it's ours, we call it the one word, right? The universe. Do you like Friedrich Nietzsche? Genealogy of Morals is an excellent book. Friedrich Nietzsche is an interesting guy. I have to admit, Andrew, I haven't read that much of Nietzsche, right? That I found that Nietzsche, how to say this properly? I'm going to articulate this badly, I'm so sure of it. That Friedrich Nietzsche is what you get when someone explores the moral and ethical aspect of humanity without themselves having their feet firmly planted on the ground. Which isn't a judgment of him. I think that his works are powerful, and they have withstood the test of time for reasons. I think that he is an important scholar that people should listen to. I just don't really see him as very well grounded. And I could very much be shown incorrectly on that, because I don't know that much about Nietzsche, honestly. I've read like Thus Spake Zarathustra back in university, but that was always kind of my takeaway from him. It's like, good night, Ruth. Have a good one. We are getting to the end of it, aren't we? I know this is personal, John, but do you ever smoke weed or cigs? No judgment, promise. I smoke marijuana. I mean, I drink. I'm alive in the world. I want to experience different ways. I've done psychedelic drugs, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it's, I don't think any of that is particularly shameful or particular, like, oh no, I want to experience the world in an altered state of consciousness. How strange. Why do you think people are still religious even though evolution shows it's BS, just brainwashing and tradition? No. I think that most religious people, myself included, accept that evolution is just the method by which God created all things. That things were created and the process of evolution is the tool of that creation, right? That we didn't discover something that disproves God. We just discovered a tool in the kit of God, right? That evolution doesn't... what evolution destroyed was sort of the old story of God, like, creating man and then putting him here and saying, like that story disappeared. And is replaced with this other story of, like, Big Bang, evolutionary structure. We rise up from the apes, right? And we constantly are evolving and changing. And that is all happening as a product of the creation of this place through the force of the quantum energy, or God, if you prefer. Just disproving sort of the old literature, right? And what's so strange about saying disproving the Bible is, like, the writers of the Bible didn't stand up and say this is scientific truth. Like, that's not what they were writing. That's what's so frustrating about that conversation, Crouching, is that the writers themselves are not that interested in writing this as a proof of anything. That literally they are writing stories, like the New Testament especially is the writing of a story that it's a cultural doctrine. It's a cultural story. It's more rooted in the morality and culture of a people. That, like, they're far more interested in capturing the horrors of what it's like to live under an oppressive, tyrannical people. The Romans were brutal, dude. The story of crucifixion is horrific, right? And we can go back there if you'd like. Like, we can go back there. For sure we can. I would prefer that we didn't. And the New Testament exists more as a way to, as an escape hatch. It exists as a method to teach us how to escape that kind of society and how to create a society that doesn't publicly crucify people in the streets, right? That's what it exists for. It doesn't exist as a scientific treatise to prove the existence of God. Nobody in that book is talking that way. Nobody is interested in that. And in my view, one of the great disservices that we've done as a people is we have allowed the evangelical Christians to hold on to the Bible. Like, they don't read it. They certainly don't understand it. And for some reason, we cede that territory to them. That if literally you wanted to destroy the entire evangelical movement, then we should just have everybody read the Bible. Because the second you read it, you realize how full of shit these guys are. Right? They're completely full of shit. Like, they're completely full of shit. Pretty sure science even comes from religion, if I'm not. Of course it does. Right? It was the monks. Right? It was the monks during the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, I prefer, but who, like, they created monasteries, they were left alone, and they started to fuck around and figure shit out. Right? That's literally how the sciences begin. Is you just left people alone, right? And instead of sitting around and being lazy, the way these capitalists like to say, well, what did they do? Well, they fucked around and they figured some shit out, right? And, like, if we just left people alone, right, and just let them fuck around, well, people would figure some shit out, right? People would figure some shit out. Okay. I think religion is also a parallel power structure to politics and economics. You won't get rid of it by only addressing the theology. Well, and that's how it kind of came to be, right? That the churches were really a countervailing structure to the empire, right? The Roman Empire was very, very serious, right? It was a very serious institution, very powerful institution, and it had no countervailing power structure whatsoever. That the power of the emperor and the power of the Senate was absolute. And so the churches arise as a way to countervail that power structure. And in many ways are a reflection of how sort of our modern sense of, like, we have this idea that you need to have spheres of power, right? So that one group can't simply take over the entire society. Well, that's very much what the church turned into. That you had the monarchy, right? That comes from the empire system. The monarchs, right? Throughout the Middle Ages and into the monarchical period. And you had the church, which was another power structure that existed to sort of counterbalance and countervail the power of the monarchy. It's very fascinating stuff. It's very fascinating stuff. All right, guys, I'm over time. You guys are great. You guys are great. I didn't even go through any of my links. I literally went through like the first 3 links. I was so worried about that. I'm like, oh, well, what am I going to talk about? Well, turns out we're going to talk about a lot of shit today. Always remember, guys, you are divine beings standing in divine energy. These billionaires spend hundreds of billions of dollars to convince you that you are less than that. Don't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.